Yeah. So we are live. Good morning. It is Wednesday, April 10th in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. And we are starting with H10, the Vermont Employment Growth Incentive Program. We have the Secretary of Commerce and Community Development here, Secretary Curley, and we'll start with your overview of revamping this program and reintroducing it to the legislature post everything, post pandemic, post flood, sort of.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So for the record, I'm Lindsay Curley, Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Good morning, everyone. Start the day with you.
Morning.
First of all, we deeply appreciate the committee's work on S-247 and your unanimous support. I know you passed the bill out unanimously and we're grateful. I feel a little bit like I'm preaching to the choir because I do have your support, but Madam Chair, as you mentioned, we are going to need help getting this over the finish line and want to make sure that we clarify some misunderstandings about the program or provide further detail to allow you all to support us as we try to help move this through.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to just set the table a little bit and then hand it over to my colleagues here to give you some more detail. And I know that Commissioner Bulio will be here today as well, which will be very nice to hear about the tax department's part of this process. So first of all, the continuation and the legislature's support of the VEGgie program is not just important, it's absolutely crucial to our goal and our ability to meet our economic growth objectives. This program has proven to be the most effective business tool that we have. It's actually the only one that we have to attract new businesses and to move and to grow here. Even the federal government recognizes its role in supporting economic growth, as evidenced by the recent passage of the CHIPS Act, which was landmark legislation providing millions to revitalize domestic manufacturing and create good paying American jobs and to strengthen the American supply chain. According to the White House, these policies have spurred a historic recovery in manufacturing, adding 642,000 manufacturing jobs since 2021. So just wanted to highlight again why, that it's important. It's not just us here in the state that think it's important too. I know, again, I'm preaching to the choir. I just want to put some information out there for others who may be more skeptical about this idea.
Public listening.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully they're all tuning in this morning.
One thing, if I could just interrupt, only because I hope as we move forward, everything you're saying, resonates. I hope as we move forward, we are talking about it as a program for businesses that want to grow here, not, oh, they said they were going to leave if we didn't give them this money kind of thing. And that, I think, is what we're trying to help our colleagues understand, as well as we bent over backwards to try to calculate what would happen if they left, instead of like, let's invest in the businesses who want to remain Vermonters.
Absolutely. And I'll hit that pedal because I know where that stems from, right? We had a company that bought out a portion of Global Foundries who did not operate in the state of Vermont. And the council did their vetting and were it was attested by the company purchasing a portion of that company that they bought for an incentive. They were not interested in operating in Vermont.
Right.
We worked really hard to keep those jobs here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some folks saw that differently. And so we've had to work really hard to try to overcome an unfortunate narrative and what some would say is a black eye for the program.
Right. And any governor and administration would have done the same. It's just now people are stuck in this mindset.
Exactly. Thank you for raising that. And that's the thing is when we see jobs that have a potential to stay here instead of leaving, we're reaching to the programs we have. But again, I have, and I was going to talk about this further, but I have such faith in the people who are serving. They're public servants and they're legislators and they're accountants and they're lawyers and they're teachers and they're realtors. They're very smart people who don't want to put themselves out there and be at risk of violating the trust of the public either. So we really want to be transparent and as transparent as we can be without compromising an employer's proprietary information. And so to Vermonters who are skeptical about the program, I want Vermonters to know we feel the same way. We would love to show you everything we can, but understanding that there are challenges to that because businesses have the right to keep some of their information private. And so we have to walk that line and we have to trust the people that we appointed to those positions as well as our executive director. Go ahead.
No, I just think the fine line you're talking about is an important one to recognize because the minute public money goes in to support a private business, there is a heightened expectation of transparency and a heightened expectation of understanding fully how that money is being deployed. And I think at least all of us in economic development appreciate that growing jobs in Vermont is incredibly important and we want to support the growth of our businesses. But I think once public money goes into it, that is where the expectation is that there's a sort of a slightly heightened sense of the need for understanding where it's going, how it's working, but also balancing the need for some privacy for some proprietary information for the business. But I think you're right, that's that fine line.
Right.
Yeah,
Public money, private good.
Right.
right.
And the business has to do a cost benefit analysis of being transparent for, what's a relatively small
Yeah, it's not
amount
that
of
much of money.
support. So-
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, it may seem like big dollars,
Right.
but in the grand scheme of things, if you look at the report, it is very, very hard to meet those benchmarks and we don't pay if somebody kind of hits a goal, right?
Mhm.
They have to full on hit the goal and they have to maintain it.
Mhm.
And so it's a tough grind. If I may, I would love to just also dispel some claims that have been made on the record that that Vermont has spent over 100 million to date in economic growth incentives since the inception of this program. In our report, you'll see, supported by the tax department, that from 2007 to 2021, the state has paid out 35 million in incentives. And those incentives have generated over 9,000 new jobs at an average wage of nearly $60,000, just under that number, 553 million in payroll, as well as 1 billion in capital investments made. And while I can't translate that number to you right now, what I can tell you is that has significant impacts on economic development, job growth in a small state. So
Is that material that you sent us in writing with
that
those
is
numbers
in the veggie report.
in the veggie?
Yes, and anything
Which
that,
is on our website, and Magali, could we post the veggie report to today's, because we're working on our legislative committee website, because they're not as easy to find everything as we would like.
yes, and report that, these reports are long and they can be weedy, but
But there are executive summaries.
there are, and it is interesting to go through and see, what companies have utilized this and the reason I'll come back to that in a minute.
And it has the methodology.
Yeah,
there for
it does,
calculating.
it does. So that was the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to underscore something again, just because we're kind of resetting here. The veggie program operates on a performance-based model. So that means no incentive is paid to the company at the time of authorization. Instead, they must meet the specific performance targets to earn the annual incentive. And it's paid out in 5 installments as a credit against the business's withholding tax.
Okay.
So importantly,
Mm.
again, I want to just remind folks that
But I don't think that's a helpful phrase
Right.
to enshrine and, just because it is a tax credit, but it doesn't take a bite out of the budget anywhere to achieve that tax credit. It lives alongside their withholding, which I think is.
Comes out of it.
Yeah,
it comes out of their
Right.
withholding, so arguably it could be, again, I'll play the devil's advocate.
Right.
It is tax revenue to the state that we are agreeing to
Forgo it.
forego.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That being said, when I just gave my numbers before, the amount that it's bringing in, it actually didn't say it, was for every dollar spent on veggie incentives,
Mhm.
during that same period was a return of $46.10.
Right.
New payroll and investments. So 1 to 46.10. So. you have a question?
Yeah, well, just a comment about the tax portion of it, that just personally, I would prefer that it be an appropriation so that it be more clear and more obvious to the public. And because there is a limitation, as I understand it, on how much tax credits can be produced in a certain year. And if we're at that limit, then the veggie person has to wait for the next year.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, go ahead.
Because it is a cost to the state, it's a cost at a different part of the
The tax
process.
expenditure bill, Wendy, is as transparent as the budget.
Yeah.
So the tax expenditure bill every year comes out from JFO, it's on JFO's website. It is I have to say, for those of us who served on Ways and Means, it is even more transparent than the budget, which is much longer and much more impenetrable. So I would argue that the tax expenditure bill, which is where this resides, is more transparent than the budget.
I always get the sense historically that Ways and Means spends more time with the shadow budget, as we call it, than finance. We just too busy and responding to too many things. But for those of us who, it's specific to Ways and Means, there's a lot of time that goes into that, and it is like understanding an entire separate budget.
You should get a copy of it, in fact. Like, I'm gonna ask you, would you be kind enough to?
May I let
Yes,
Commissioner Goldstein
yes,
sign it
absolutely.
for the record?
I was just gonna
Just
say, Joe Goldstein, Commissioner of Economic Development, Craig Bolio, I think will be
Great, yes.
addressing that. He told us yesterday, it was on page 18 of the tax expenditure report.
Okay,
A
very
full
good.
history of like what has been
Great,
paid out
great.
from veggie, so that's actual,
Yeah.
rather than authorized.
Mhm.
So there's a limit on what we authorize each year, and I just wanted to make sure we didn't
Right,
use both, but
yeah.
yeah, but
And
it's.
even just knowing the page and where
Yes,
it is, that's helpful to remind us, like, I know we've known this
Yeah.
somewhere.
Okay, I'll
behind.
print it out for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so you'll hear more from Commissioner Bolio and be able to,
Mhm.
dive a little
Right.
deeper into that with
Yeah.
him. I'll not play tax commissioner today.
Right.
Let's see, and again, just want to, make a fine point on this, if, to say that incentive payments are not prorated for partially meeting performance requirements.
Mhm.
So that incentivizes the companies to fully meet their commitments, and as I mentioned, those are not liked. In fact, I'll have somebody later correct me on this, but I think that we end up paying out around 65% of less of what we actually authorize.
Mhm.
That's how difficult it is to meet benchmarks.
That's how many people actually meet their benchmark.
Yeah, no, I understand, and actually a comment,
Mhm.
Madam Chair, so. The way found more support for this program was, there was a presentation by, no, Commissioner, thank you, I'm just working on the title.
Yeah.
But the cost per incentive, per job that Vermont ends up paying, after the incentive is processed,
Mhm.
is about roughly $3,000 per job,
Okay,
which is much less than the other states pay. And it is because that it's only done upon actual completion of the job rather than paid up front. So I very much appreciate that part of the program and that what we pay out is less. I would like to, at some point, find or know, and I don't see that we calculated anywhere, the administrative costs of the program, because I suspect those would be higher because we do more administration with all of our calculations, both up front and when the target is made. But I still think it's going to be much lower than what other states pay per job.
Do
So I
you
think
want
that
to
is
see it
valuable.
separated out by existing veggie and the vision for the administrative cost to Vita of the small business?
That would be great, because I'm sure it would be less expensive, but I don't know that they could even come up with those costs now.
So
Thought we
Because
did,
it would,
yeah.
currently there are 2 people, staffers in Vepsi, and 1 person at tax that does the verification.
But then what we
And
pay
the
the economists, that's not
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
that
So-
big budget. we would-
Yeah, that'd be great. So 3 FTEs.
Yeah.
And paying the economist
Yes,
a lot, but yeah. paying-
and also systems, there's systems
Yeah.
charge.
Okay, we can get some information to you.
Okay, that would be
I,
great.
uh,
Yeah.
What I just heard was music to my ears that you actually think that, that you would potentially be supportive of us doing more.
Oh, and I have been.
And I, and
Public.
so, no, I'm just sort of making that clear.
Yeah.
Again, you know, absolutely, we, as you know, we want to support more and, you know, we feel, not gonna lie, sometimes we feel like we just wanna make sure we can keep this program going. And so we're trying to be as, find as big of a compromise to help people believe in it and give us a chance to sort of I hate to say hit reset here, but to really demonstrate to
Mhm.
folks that it is transparent and it is a good program. And like the federal government, it can really boost our
Yeah.
economy.
Yeah, and you know, our committee has a current, I will speak for myself, I have a current and future interest in manufacturing as it relates to housing and how critical having local housing manufacturing is gonna be going forward. And so we don't wanna lose skilled manufacturers and you know, metal workers and we want a robust, I think every state is gonna need to have a robust manufactured housing economy going forward. So
Yes.
I want us to have manufacturing and not lose any, which I was glad to see New Haven just back up at.
Yeah.
Going to be back up at.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll jump forward a little bit because I know I've taken more time and I want to make sure that my colleagues have plenty of time in the seat here with you. But I do want to make another point to talk about the proposed Vita forgivable loan program. When Lawson's and Coma and Resident Bank here came in, they testified and they did speak in favor of the loan program as a tool that would help them. And I just wanted to share, as a former business owner myself, I recall we were 15 FTEs or less. And I recall being in the same position. I actually remember specifically having that moment in time of saying, boy, we could really grow if only somebody could help us with some capital to help cover the hiring of a few people that would help us make that next leap. My husband and I were running the business and we were doing the accounting and the HR and the you know, the facility upgrades. We were doing it all. And so when I hear from small businesses that they just need a little extra boost there, I think this program could be incredibly helpful to them. And it's not huge dollars. In the grand scheme of things, it would be very valuable for them to have some cash on hand to make that next leap. So I just wanted to make my own plea, my personal plea to say
That's her.
how incredibly helpful that would be for our small businesses to have a chance to grow in Vermont and to stay
Yeah.
here and to continue.
I'm
to take jobs.
interested in what, you know, the auditor and others will say. I'm very sold on the small business forgivable loan because all our colleagues have been saying for years, it's so complicated, it's such a high bar, none of us can participate. And you all have finally worked to create an avenue for folks, and now it's like controversial all of a sudden. You know, so this is the piece I feel most strongly about, honestly. I'll again just speak for myself, but that is the size of business we generally have in Vermont that can go from small to medium and then become the next member, you know, so I will do my best to particularly sell that piece and defend that piece. I'm not sure why all of a sudden, and I'm happy to hear from the auditor, you know, that is so, you know, concerning for people.
And when we talk about it, I think we should talk about the personnel versus the capital, because the capital is what I'm very the most concerned about.
Yes, and I do want to talk about that. I have lots of other thoughts too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on that point, the capital equation, I mean, capital translates into jobs.
Oh, no, I understand.
But well, not
Yeah.
everybody does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think capital
Mhm.
goes hand in glove with creating jobs, because the more innovation you can introduce in the workplace, either the more jobs and the better jobs you can actually have.
Oh.
So but I don't think everybody appreciates that. They think, oh, this just is helping pay people to public's grade and improve and on the public's back.
Right.
Yeah, actually, there's a translation, a direct translation in the number of jobs they.
Especially in certain industries like manufacturing, and Chroma is a very good example of that.
Yes.
Yeah, Chroma is a great example.
Right.
Yeah, and again, just for those that are, the public listening or the others that may be listening, it is, that capital investment is a catalyst, to your point.
That's a better word.
It brings,
Thank
no, it's fine, it brings other business growth as well, right?
Mhm.
You think about some of our companies that started really small in the state and have grown, and all the other spin-offs. And the infrastructure improvements, right, when they improve their infrastructure, they often have to improve the infrastructure around them. There is so much good that happens when our employers make big investments. So anyway, that's all I have.
Yeah.
If you have questions for me, or I can move and.
If it's okay, I'm like, really glad to see Jessica here in person, et cetera. I think we have about 35 minutes, and we should give the auditor some time and the tax commissioner some time, and then have kind of a discussion that we invite you into, and maybe make some changes to the draft we announced. That work. Okay. Auditor Hoffman, you can stay there if you want.
No, it's okay.
And I did send the JFO report to McGoffin,
Great.
so that you can post it on the website.
Thank you.
And it is on page 23 of the PDF, which translates to page 18 in the document.
Great. And do you want to introduce yourself for the record and just?
Oh,
say,
sure. I'm
like,
Jessica
hello?
Hartleyman. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council. Thank you for having me here today.
Yes, and thank you for sending us all that background data you said short of the last day.
Can you remind us sort of where you were before and?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Do you want me to? I
You
worked
can do
there.
Yeah.
So prior to becoming the executive director, I was appointed by the governor as of January 1st of 2024. I was the DED staff attorney, started in October of 2021. I was hired to help DED with the ARPA related programs, to make sure that we were following both the US Treasury final rule regulations, and then the state guidelines as they were adopted by the legislature, and on other programs within as requested.
Yeah.
So I've been an attorney for over 20 years. I've had my own private practice. So I've been a small business owner. Prior to coming to DED, I worked at the Attorney General's office, primarily working with the Agency of Human Services. And I was assigned to the Department for Children and Families, doing mostly trial litigation.
Okay.
So that's
All
my,
right, tough jobs, so.
That's my-
Happy to have you in this role.
2-minute background.
Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but great to have a legal background for veggie and Pepsi.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Senator Cummings, we just had the secretary in the seat, and we just got reintroduced to Jessica Hartleyman. And we now have the auditor up to testify. Okay, good.
He's in the principal's office.
Yeah, no, we're all.
I think I'm
gonna
gonna
be
spend
pulled out.
a lot of time there.
Yeah, that's fair.
Good morning.
Good morning.
2 days in a
Thank you.
row, Doc.
Thank you
Not
indeed.
bad.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for getting me in sooner. I appreciate that. A couple of things. I know that to a large extent, this is about veggie and the continuation of the program as opposed to the forgivable loan thing. So I'll try to be brief and just make some highlight points. First, the secretary said that someone, she meant me, of course, had said that the program had distributed or awarded $100 million. That includes EATI, which was the predecessor to veggie, and in fact was a tax credit. The current program is not a tax credit per se, but that
You
figure
mean-
was about, I'm sorry, yes?
Do you mean before 2007 or
Yeah,
during the?
EATI started under Howard Dean and was a tax credit and was the predecessor of this program. And there were many similarities. It was changed in 06. The first awards came to bear in 07, but it's essentially the same idea. It's an incentive program for job creation. And so the total 5 years ago was about 90 million. And of course, we've seen a lot more go out the door since then. A good deal of it, by the way, went to Marvell. And unlike any of you, and I have a problem with this, I am the only person who has seen the documentation that is supposedly the support for a decision by VEPSI to give them the money. I have seen that data. They won't let you see it. I've seen it. Marvell never
But
said
Senator
anything.
Harrison will see, like our appointees to VEPSI will see it.
Our three legislative people who serve on
Right.
FCC.
So we do have one person who will soon and probably has seen it.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet, but
Well, I can only tell you that you've never heard what I found when I looked at all of the materials related to 5 awardees several years ago.
okay.
Those awards were made with virtually no due diligence. And in 2 cases, the former secretary or director, I should say, specifically encouraged the council to look harder and deeper at those applications, and they awarded them anyway. But for the record, Marvell, I read that application, every bit of it. Not one word was said about moving those people. In fact, if you think about it, that's not manufacturing. That division of Global Foundries was engineering, and those people are incredibly valuable. They're the ones, and their predecessors from IBM forward, are responsible for enormous amounts of money in patents. So if you're Global Foundries and you decide to get into yet another part of the technical area and you don't have it, you're not going to ask these people to move. They are a unit. They work together. There's no reason to move them, and they had no intention of moving. Furthermore, the methodology by the then staffer, it's now Jeff Carr, as you know, going back to doing the model for them, assumed for the model run that there was a plant shutdown, and there was no such thing. That's why they got $5 million, because they assumed every single job was new, and none of them were new. So you guys are told the story by advocates for veggie, but you almost never hear the other side. And this.
Can I just ask for my own memory? Didn't our governor prior to this one also give a large sum of money out of an enterprise fund? That, I mean, like we've had this problem, it hasn't. It's been a kind of specific problem that, and Essex Democrats and Republicans tend to get involved and worry about the future of one of our largest employers and community. So I just if maybe we should talk about other examples, because that one is so specific and been such a thorn in our side.
The problem is I can't tell you the names of the companies that I reviewed. If you look at a report, I can send it to your committee. I looked at 5 companies that went through the process and were all awarded money. I can't name them. In the report, I give you a paragraph or 2 about each one that I think is sufficient to avoid people knowing who they are, but it tells the story about, well, what kind of information was provided to the council? Was it sufficient in the view of an objective person? Is that enough information to say, yeah, I believe they're but for? Most of the but fors really didn't make the grade. I encourage you to read it. That part of the report is a page and a half, literally.
When you say awarded, Doug, do you mean that they went through the metrics of success and received the money, or they were awarded the opportunity to meet those metrics?
Yeah, this is another sort of misleading element of the program. They are fond of saying nobody gets a dollar till they create a job, but the centerpiece of the program is the but for. The point is, if they were going to create the jobs anyway, then you're wasting every single dollar. And here's something that coincidentally came about a few years ago during my work on this project, and that is the guy who was recognized as the most respected researcher, peer-reviewed level researcher in the country for decades on incentives, and he generally likes incentives, but he was curious about the but for, but he wanted to wait until there was enough respectable research for him to do a meta-analysis of all of those studies, 30 studies. And he came out and said, look, what I can tell you is that in my opinion, based on a review of these 30 studies, at least 75% of the economic activity supposedly incentivized in but-for programs would have occurred anyway. This guy.
But it might have occurred at a lower pay, which might not have attracted the top talent that they wanted. I mean, I think
that's not what he said. That's not what he said, Madam Chair. He said it would have happened anyway.
are you next?
I don't know what to tell you. This guy, if you look at the extent to which his work is referenced by other researchers, it tells you who he is and how
What's
respected.
his name?
His name is Tim Bartik, Bartik, and there's a link to it in the report that I'll send to you.
Okay.
I mean, thousands of other people cite his work every year. In any case,
Yeah.
I'm
Doc,
sorry.
I think Randy's asking you a question.
I'm asking a question, I'm making a statement. And the statement is, having served as the auditor many years ago, I go back to what this program was in 2004, 2005. And the same issues that you're raising, Doug, occurred then. The same suspicion as to whether people were telling the truth occurred then. I remember asking one business owner why they didn't apply to the veggie program. And their answer was, I wouldn't lie. And that was a well-known, I think, issue regarding this program and has been for many years. Now, that said, I can still view it as successful because I recognize that it is a judgmental rather than an auditable result. You cannot say with any certainty that because of particular action that Veggie did or an amount that they gave, that the jobs actually were created in the way that the model indicated there would be. There was a belief, there was a religion, there was also the way, because I've looked at these programs not just in Vermont, but on the other side of the desk, or the corporate side, years ago in many areas, including many countries. And the thing that I learned there is that people make these decisions often not because of the amount of money they're rewarded, but because of the atmosphere in which that happens. And that is pure judgment. It's not really auditable as such. I did have major criticisms, though, of the but-for and the degree of testing even done then, which was not up to the standard. And I see that you're finding exactly the same thing, that the statements that are presented weren't viewed with diligence, with and an appropriate depth to validate that they were in fact true. And yes, in many cases, the job conceivably could have done elsewhere. In other cases, the jobs were going to be done here regardless of whether the money was paid or not. And then there were all kinds of iterations in between. The net effect, though, as I stand back and look at how it would have appeared on the other side of the desk, Vermont's willingness to provide an incentive is a major issue in a company's decision as to whether or not to continue the activity, to do more of the activity, to bring more jobs to Vermont, and also in the way that it's looked at outside. I remember my favorite incentive program like this during those years was Ireland. And Ireland, as you know, got an awful lot of US business in because of their incentive programs. But they would always present the incentive programs like, I know, that you may want to come here, you may want to go elsewhere, but here are the things we've got. We've got educational programs, we've got tax credits, we've got other incentive programs, but tell us what you want. That we don't do. And you could tailor a program, and it wasn't the sum total of the program that made the company decide to open a major enterprise in Ireland. It was the attitude of the development officials in Ireland. And I think that is a degree here. The notion companies are impressed when states or nations go after them and want their business and make a conscious effort and demonstrate for whatever incentive they have. We can't offer the incentives of a New York or of a Pennsylvania or of a Texas. But the fact that we're offering something and we're pushing it, that I think is a major issue. That's a judgment call, though. That's not something that can be audited.
Well, thank you for all of that. And you're absolutely right. I can't audit faith. And that's what this program is based on. And furthermore, your Irish example is a good one for this reason. I have access to the National Establishment Time Series, which is a massive data set, but it's basically Dun & Bradstreet data. And I looked at the question years ago when people were making that assertion. We need to have a program to attract business. I thought, okay, let's find out what percentage of job growth in Vermont is a result of interstate activity. And in fact, you might find this curious, the federal government to this day does not produce data on interstate job movement. Very weird. In any case, the answer, which I subsequently learned was replicated in studies in California and elsewhere, is about 2 to 3%. Now, you might say all jobs are good, and that's true. The question is, what else could we do with the money? And to your point, what CEOs have said, confidentially and publicly for decades, when asked, what do you want in a community when you're looking to expand or relocate? And they say the same three things every time. We want quality of life, we want infrastructure, and that changes over time, the nature of that, and we want a good, educated, and trained workforce. That's what they need. It has nothing to do with taxes or incentives, in truth. Ireland was a really unusual circumstance, I'll give you that. But if I could turn briefly, I know you have other people to hear from, the proposal about the forgivable loan program.
Wait a minute, before I just was gonna tack onto this notion of the other thing, that those jobs may have been created independent of whether they got this incentive, but in the time we need them created, did you take into account the time frame? Because if a job is gonna be created, yeah, that job might have been created 6 years from now, but we want that job created now. And did you take into account the time frame that might be accelerated as a result of this incentive?
Yes, I did. And I can tell you that I don't think VEPSI did. The point is, if you're a business owner and the demand for your goods or services that you produce is exceeding your capacity to do that, you have no choice. Well, you have a choice. You can stay status quo and not grow. Most businesses would prefer to grow and meet that extra new demand. In order to do that, you need a capital investment for a larger facility, new equipment and so forth, perhaps getting new productivity as well, if you're lucky, and you need more bodies. And you can't wait a couple of years, because if you wait, your competitor's going to do it. Business owners are smart. The successful ones know exactly what they're doing. And if the conditions in the market warrant expansion, then they're fools not to do it. If we step up and say, we'll give you money for doing that, I don't blame them for asking for it. I'm not demonizing the business community. That's not the point. But
I benefited from visiting Resonant Link, which I think will change the world with their charging technology, you know, from medical devices to electric construction vehicles. They are looking at an entirely new way of providing charging. And when they talked about their use of veggie, it was they're still not meeting demand. I mean, they really want to be meeting the demand that they have, but they have to iterate. I mean, you know, we watched people who came out of the restaurant industry developing devices that are like medical implants, oral medical implants. They have to iterate a lot, and they're paying people well before they make any money from these products that will change the world. And that's what they used veggie for. And again, I go back to Senator Brock's point, like, I have a lot of faith that they will one day meet the demand that's out there, but how are we supposed to measure what they were or were not able to do and where they would do it? They want Vermont's quality of life. They're hiring people out of UVM left and right, but they would not have been able to grow in the time that they want to grow to meet demand. And I just don't know if you've talked to them, or, you know, these are examples that I think are relevant to what we have to think about for the kinds of companies that will be the future of how Vermont, you know, plays its role in the global economy.
Well, I would direct your attention to the piece of paper that I hope your staffer gave you that I sent her. And it's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Vermont Department of Labor. And it shows you in the highlighted column that last year, 29,000 jobs were created, added from either businesses expanding or opening. There is an enormous amount of churn in the economy here and everywhere. So the question about how can businesses respond to challenge in the marketplace is, some of them take risks, some of them are smart, some of them partner with other smart people, and it gets done. But the point is, how could we possibly have had 29,000 new jobs without all of them getting incentives? The answer is, the economy handles itself pretty well. We are not interfering with, but intervening in the economy in a way that you have been led to believe is critical. I don't believe the evidence supports that. Neither does Tim Bartik. Neither do the 30 studies that he reviewed. Do I think we should, as a community, make investments? Of course we should. But I don't think this is the best way to improve the economy or make long-term investments. That should be infrastructure, workforce education and training, and quality of life. That's what we need. And we already do that. We do a lot of that. But I don't happen to think that this money is well spent. With regard to the proposal for the forgivable loan program, whether it's just jobs or not, I mean, I have a couple of problems with that. First of all, where did the $5,000 per worker come from? You know, at least in Veggie, it's run through the model. And then you determine, well, we think it's kind of like the net fiscal impact for the program that we are auditing and will present to you maybe before you leave. But at least there's an effort to determine what the job and the new activity will produce in the economy and in terms of fiscal return. This just says, create a job, we give you $5,000. Well, what if the business goes down? Look at the other side of that document I gave you. Those are the numbers on the businesses that contract or close.
I don't, we don't.
Use this.
You know what I mean? How do you
Okay,
know
you mean
that some of the companies that are going to get the $5,000 per employee are going to be here in 3 years? You don't. You have no idea. And furthermore, I would argue you need a fiscal note, because even if a small percentage of these employers who created these 29,000 jobs come to the door and ask for the money, it could be a lot of money. It could be more than Veggie. And the churn in small business is just too risky. I happen to agree with you, Madam Chair, that helping businesses move from small to medium is absolutely one of the best things we can do. It's often the case that what they need, if you've heard from Helen Kaler, she's preaching about this for 10 years, what they often need is technical assistance. It's one thing, to be smart and an entrepreneur and have a great idea and get something started. That doesn't mean you know how to make a business go from 6 to 25 employees. That's a different skill set. And we could make a good investment in that area, among others. But all I can say is I'm not sure what problem this forgivable loan program is trying to solve. There's no shortage of jobs being created without an incentive for these guys.
That's not it.
Any other questions? Audited?
No, not at the moment, Doug, but thank you. You are nothing if not consistent.
That's right.
I live for the facts. Your colleague across the table will tell you that.
That's great, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Doug, good to see you, thank you.
So we don't have Commissioner Bolio yet. We may either get him in for testimony again. We may have to talk to him sort of offline to shore up all of our figures. We'll do our best with whatever we have. But I do want to get Rick in the witness chair so we can talk about the final language that we want to vote. We don't have to vote today. Did I put possible vote? I did put possible vote. I don't think we're gonna take a vote. I don't want to rush us toward that in 15 minutes.
That's good, that's some changes.
He has the changes
Okay,
that
right.
we have kind
So do we have a new copy of 10 that we could look at?
Can you write that?
And then I sent some suggestions.
Yeah, for us to discuss, yeah, great.
Right. Okay, for now, Rick, can you share it on your?
Yeah, I
That's
certainly
right.
can.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Rick Sagel, Office of Legislative Counsel. So you should have 1.2 of H10. I'm gonna share it on the screen here in case you don't have that copy.
We are getting it.
Okay,
Golly to the rest of you.
so if you remember, H10 passed the House, addressed the membership of Pepsi. It also made some ethical updates to the Pepsi process. The state economist was added into the process. So there was the directive from the committee to add parts of 247, which passes committee to H10. So I'm going to kind of go over the things I did to kind of mold these together. Firstly, I added the repealing of the sunset as section 1. I remember the committee liked that last time, to have the first section be the total deletion of the sunset. So that would be repealed. The previous version of H10 had the sunset extended out for 1 year. So this would be a total repeal of the sunset. Section 2.
Do you have any?
Do you want comments as we go along? Just a quick one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I made that suggestion, and I think it's more clear if it's at the beginning of the bill.
Oh, right.
And it's just important to note that the legislature can end this program at any time, any year, we can.
Right, just because there's no sunset, it doesn't
Yes.
mean that we can't look at it every year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, section 2 gets back into H10, which is the membership of the committee goes from 11 to 9, and those 9 are redistributed. You have 5 appointed by the governor, and you have 4 appointed by the legislature, 2 by the speaker, 2 by the Senate committee and committees. No changes there.
Joan,
I'm prepared to speak on.
you're prepared to speak on? Okay, do you want to hear a bucket of them and then speak on them?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yep.
Senator Harrison.
I just have a comment on the membership.
Okay,
You want that now?
why don't we do the bucket? This is the next changes that are kind of administrative to Betsy, and then you wanna speak and then you.
Okay, got it.
Okay,
All right.
and that's been left alone. for-
Left alone. Yeah, I highlighted the things that changed, and I'll
Mhm.
highlight the highlights.
Highlight the highlights.
So no changes on the rest of page 2. Again, page 3, we added vacancy notice 30 days to alert of a vacancy on Betsy. Not changed. Page 4. We have.
Sorry,
the-
can I just be clear? That's solving the problem currently, if there's a vacancy, there's no note, I mean, what's
Well,
the problem?
let's let
I
Ray
have that same question.
Okay.
note that, Jessica, and we'll come back to that. But let's get through the administrative ones, because we took some out also.
Page 4, we have the adopting and make publicly available policy governing conflicts of interest that meet or exceed the requirements in the state code of ethics. That did not change. Page 5, again, we continue on with the ethics. The council shall not enter into executive session to discuss applications or other matters pertaining to veggie under subchapter 2 of this chapter, unless the executive branch state economist is present. Okay?
And so was it in that previous section that we took out some things that were in H10? Like we took out something about the legislative member can ask.
That's
for
coming in later,
anything.
right? Yes, Madam Chair.
It's coming up.
Yes, it's one of the last things that it's in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So we're still in the administrative.
yes. Yeah, I mean, now we're in the cost benefit model,
Which is-
But the mechanics of the program
Right.
versus the actual benefits.
correct,
Okay.
correct. This is still the Pepsi,
Yes.
part of the bill. Under the cost benefit model, you're adding, again, this is from H10, that the council shall contract with the executive branch state economist to perform the cost benefit analysis. The executive branch state economist shall consult with the JFO or its agent concerning the performance of the cost benefit analysis. Which the value of potential incentives may earn equals or exceeds $1 million. Okay. So 3327 is new, not from the last walkthrough, but I made changes to it. The committee indicated that they didn't like that there were 2 different reports, right, in this.
Right.
But I thought I want to present this to you, and you can disagree with me.
Right.
I think that it's important, if you want the Pepsi Council to have this plan every 5 years, whatever it is,
Mhm.
that should be its own
Yes.
section.
Yeah.
So I changed this from a report to the idea that you need to have this 5-year cycle, and I'll read it to you.
Yeah.
The council shall engage in a strategic planning process to evaluate current state-funded economic development initiative programs on a 5-year cycle. This strategic planning process shall include an examination of the performance of current state-funded economic development incentive programs and a determination as to whether changes are necessary to advance workforce development or economic development systems in the state. So pursuant to this process, the council shall consult with RDCs, regional chambers of commerce, and business and development organizations identified by the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund to be geographically and demographically diverse in reviewing and considering the purpose and performance of these incentive programs and the appropriate incentives during low employment and during high employment. And now you have the reporting on this process. Starting December 1st, 2026, and repeating every 5 years thereafter, the council shall submit a report to House Commerce and Senate Economic Development with its findings on the strategic planning process and any recommendations for legislative action, including whether and how any proposed program, addition, revision, or other legislative action would, integrate with and further advance the current workforce development and economic development systems in the state, and advance the core principles of economic development articulated in 10 DSA
So
3.
that's unchanged.
That's unchanged. And it is actually 10 DSA 3.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I was
Yeah,
like,
no.
I was like, no way
You
to
were
put it.
skeptical,
Yes,
but it was.
that's what it was.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we still on mechanics?
Yeah, but now we're getting to veggie.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So this is from 247, at
Mhm.
247. We are adding the forgivable loan. This again, straight from 247. I did make one change from S247. I think this should be an or.
Hmm.
The purpose of veggie is to generate new net revenue to the state by providing incentives to a business for adding new payroll, new jobs, or new capital investments. I tend to think I can be
Mhm.
swayed, but.
No, that
Or
makes
something,
sense
right.
to me, yeah.
And then here's a but for it, otherwise would not have without the incentive. You heard the auditor discuss.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, on page 8, no changes on.
I mean, I do have a question, a philosophical question that we don't have to answer now, but I don't know, like maybe we take that part out, you know, if, I don't know what the new metric would be, but again, to me, the but for is secondary to like they are contributing to Vermont economy, like this whole,
Then you just said every job.
Well, yeah, and there has to be a clear public purpose to spend
Right.
public money.
I guess like, I'm just gonna keep dwelling on like, is there a different public purpose than them saying like, we're not gonna do this unless you give us the money. As
Right,
Senator
it does.
Brock said, it in sense, it's not dishonest, it's just,
It's pretty dishonest.
well, what is, I mean.
Yeah.
They can't always measure when they would do it, how much they would pay, et cetera. I mean, that has to involve some funny math, so.
Well, again, the one thing about the but-for test is it causes the VEPSI board to actually do some work to try to determine as
Right.
best they can, admittedly imperfectly,
Mhm,
that the activities of the company make sense
mhm.
and that there's a reason for doing this. But beyond that is recognized, you're never going to be able to audit it.
Right.
The evidence is not, you're kidding yourself if you think there's real evidence.
Senator Hopkins.
We've been into the discussion and CSL on this.
Yeah.
We do it because every other state does it, and if you don't do something, it says you don't care.
That's
Every
right.
state,
You're absolutely right.
every state hates it,
Well, that goes.
but no state wants to be the first to
Right.
say we don't, because, yeah.
And every company that has its hand out to get that assistance says, you know, if they don't give me something, I really should think about whether or not they want me.
Well,
Whether or not this is important
I mean,
enough to them.
I'm very moved by a lot of the businesses we've talked to saying they just wouldn't have done it in the same way
Or the same time.
or the same time frame.
I think the time.
And that I think is easier to have a back and forth about than we wouldn't have done it. Like that's, who can prove that?
And just because we can't prove it doesn't mean it's not sometimes true.
Right. So anyway, I'm gonna keep thinking about this piece. But I hope others
The
will.
whole thing begs the question to me, talking about a strategic plan. I guess I'm kind of shocked that somebody doesn't have a strategic plan already. I mean, veggie, I've always seen as a function of some plan. I would think that the Agency of Community Development would have a strategic business plan. What kind of businesses do we want to attract? Where do we want to attract them? And then veggie can operate as one of many, perhaps, incentives within that frame. I think veggie's just hanging out there by itself and it's easy to shoot at. But I think this whole thing needs to be more professionalized, because I think when businesses come here, they expect, if you're dealing in money, that you're going to be professional, and if you aren't, they might have second thoughts.
Secretary Curley, if at some point, I mean, I think what I it does sound really nice to have like a full statewide economic strategic plan. What that does is kind of articulate in a political way winners and losers. You're not part of who we strategically want to invest in. We don't know all of that for sure. If you find another state that has a good like guiding economic document and how close we are to matching that. I mean, we also don't have like an office of research and
Right. You don't have a plan.
so
Well,
But we
yeah, we have plans at the local level, like we have,
seven,
like, yeah,
But
so we have an economic development plan.
Well,
so
we
Vinny
have
is actually
several, I
looking at-
don't know that all of those several regional plans are coordinated anywhere. An example.
They are looking at them
We
now,
had,
right?
the
I don't know if
Fed
they did
in
before.
Boston
Yeah.
did a thing, the money chairs and staff plan.
Mhm.
Boston had a very definite plan. It said, what do we have? We have hospitals, we have insurance, we have universities, we have research. They set their whole plan around. So what we need to do is attract, and they did a variety of things. Somebody said, well, yeah, but I can put my offices, but I'd like to see a coffee shop my people can go to. Okay, we'll work on it. Janet Ansel and I got stuck in a traffic jam for 3 hours coming home and trying to figure out what Vermont could do like that. We failed, but
Well,
it was only 3 hours with enough
That's
traffic.
only 3 hours.
Yeah, it was only 3 hours, but there is that kind of planning done on what are your strengths, what kind of business would be happy here. It's pretty obvious we don't want anything with smokestacks and, stuff going into the atmosphere, so captive insurance, we love. It spends a lot of money, it has a couple of little offices we never see. But they employ people and they pay well.
So we are really tight on time today in general. 121 should be finishing our live. If you could finish the administrative pieces and then we can go to Jessica. And then I think we all just remind us where we're at with the final piece.
Right.
So sorry, have you just popped in S247 in here? If we just embedded.
For the most part.
I'll show you maybe there's, I think, one or two other changes.
Yeah.
Everything else you've read before. So let me hop down to the highlighted section. And it is about the capital investment portion. I believe Senator Harrison requested, so when you're calculating the forgivable loan incentive, this used to be $1 million on page 17 of the bill. To determine the dollar amount for a forgivable loan incentive, the council shall multiply the number of full-time employees of a qualifying business by a maximum of 5,000 with a maximum total award of 200,000 and take the lesser of 20% of total capital investments made by the qualified business or $500,000
Instead of $1 million.
instead of $1 million. And that, I believe, was a directive from committee vote. We can talk about it. That should be moved back up to $1 million or a different number.
Are there any more changes?
So that is for the capital investment.
Yes.
That seems low. for
Well,
the capital
we're,
investment. Yeah.
I, on my own, added this language on
Okay.
subdivision 6, talking about Department of Taxes shall not approve the forgiveness of the loan. I'm sorry, actually, it's a separate subdivision. Upon verification that the requirements of this subsection are met, the Department of Taxes shall pay the Vermont Economic Development Authority for the full amount of the loan that has been forgiven. That language was there. I want to make sure it was clear that they get paid back if the loan is forgiven, not just if the loan is given out. So I figured that was the intent of the
good point.
language, but just want to make sure
Yeah.
that it's made clear.
Good idea.
Otherwise, I think everything else is, and I kept the
Okay.
appropriation. That was also in 247.
So.
Okay, Jessica. Well, we have you here in person.
Yes. Shall I get up?
Probably.
Okay.
But leave the language up.
Okay.
Okay, so then I just want to clarify so that the rest of.
And I kept the appropriation.
I don't know if that's right.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Okay,
can I just ask a question?
yeah.
So that was 330 and then into 247. What, the reporting we took care of in terms of not doubling up, but was the rest of, the rest of 10 where is that?
So it's
gone?
It is Senator
It's still
Clarkson.
there.
It's still there. If you go to page,
I don't have it yet, so.
if you go up, I'll show on the screen.
Oh, you're so good. Here we have.
So part of it is on page 19.
Okay, so it's there.
Yeah.
I just wanted, we were,
I didn't take anything out of H 10.
okay.
I said it goes in order of the
Okay,
section
great.
numbers.
Yeah, no, I saw it. 340 it's 340.
Yep.
But we had asked you to take some things out from that bill.
Of H 10.
Yes,
You asked me.
like the preview for legislative
Yeah, I'll
members,
sh-
I think.
Let me show you where that is.
Just so we all know what we're reading.
Yeah, I'm so curious about why that was there.
3340.
We never talked about that.
33,
40.
We can,
41.
But maybe it doesn't matter.
I mean, yeah, we can have the
Okay,
committee, and I think to me, it relates to the auditor saying, none of you have seen what I said or whatever.
Yeah.
But there was a conflict because there wasn't necessarily a legislative member, so that language didn't make.
Right, so I think it's our decision now that we take it out and they can be mad at us, but we
Right,
maybe
but-
have comments today.
One of my comments is that I think there should be legislative members, but.
So that there are members,
There are 4.
No, there are two
Appointed.
appointed by each body, but they're not necessarily members. I think one of those two in each case
There
should
it
be
is.
a member.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
those are my comments,
Okay.
we're gonna go with
Oh,
Jessica's
okay, do
comments
people
first.
disagree with seeing that in the next draft from Rick? What Senator Harrison just suggested?
Gosh, I,
Well, if you have a legislative member, the question is, the legislative member to be bound by the confidentiality rules apply to the board as a whole.
I think so.
And I think so as well,
Yeah.
because obviously, one of the issues, the big issue is in doing the kind of review that you're doing of these
Yes.
companies, you're dealing with information that is
Right.
proprietary, and as a result, it needs to be kept confidential.
And that's why we took out like something about any member of the legislature can ask for this because they're not bound by confidentiality. But the members we appoint to VEPSI are bound by confidentiality.
Right.
So are people okay with looking at that language?
so the
Like
2 members appointed by the speaker, one of which shall be a House member.
something like that.
Yes,
We don't have
yes,
to,
and
okay.
and I put that on, that's on my list, that I
Okay,
sent to
great.
you.
Great, Jessica.
Thank you so much. For the record, I'm Jessica Hartley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council. Thank you so much for having me here today. I have talked about H10 with members of the council, and I'm here to offer the comments that I've received from council members to this
Okay.
committee. So with respect to the membership, the council at this time believes that changing the composition and the appointment authority of the membership does not need to happen. In fact, in looking at prior materials, there was a report on progress underway for audit recommendations to the VEGgie program that was released back in 2012 and found that having representatives from the legislative branch should increase the level of review and due diligence. And in addition to the review of VEGgie applications, the participation of Senate members on the VEPSI board is significant for the council's review of not only VEGgie applications, but TIF district applications and for ongoing TIF oversight, because that is the legislative mandate for the VEPSI council. It's not just for VEGgie, it's also for TIF.
Right.
So the council feels strongly that at this time, there should not be a change in the membership, that legislators are an integral part of helping the legislature understand this program.
So
Agreed.
let me make sure I understand. You don't want it to go from 11 members to 9.
No,
But we had 1 member appointed by each body and it would go up to 2 appointed by each body. So do you agree with that part or?
if you want to have additional legislators on the
Mhm.
council, increasing the number as opposed to decreasing, because the issue around the appointment, so in that same letter that I found, the issue around the appointment occurred back in 2019 There was a senator that had left the council in 2017, and the Senate did not
That's
appoint
right, we
someone.
haven't read strike.
And so there has been some issues apparently prior to my time, as I've only been here
Mhm.
for 4 months.
Yeah.
So everything I'm reading is historical. I would just say that it is very difficult for legislators because you are all so busy to come to meetings, but it is imperative for legislators and for council members to be involved, active, and participate in this process.
Right.
Um,
So I'm stealing time already. We have 3 minutes.
Sure,
So
let
maybe
me-
I'll stop asking you questions. I think, what we'll do is have you share all the concerns, and then you can work with Senator Harrison
Sure.
on integrating those changes
Yeah.
in the next draft.
Okay. So quickly, with respect to the code of ethics, the current legislation, wants the council to adopt and make public a policy governing conflicts of interest that meet or exceed the requirements of the state code of ethics. I sent to you, the executive, order 1917 of 2017. Because this council is an executive branch council, the members are governor appointed and must follow the executive code of ethics, and the additional reporting requirements, that were passed as part of that executive order. Those provisions include specific conflict of interest provisions. And additionally, it specifically requires an appointee not to take any action in any manner in which he or she has either a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest until that council conflict is resolved. So we believe
Got it.
that,
I think we
Now,
get
there's now a state
Yeah.
code of ethics, so I'd like
like,
to
we
know.
can
how
talk about that, but let's
Why
move
do
to
we
the
keep
next.
doing
one.
separate ones?
Well,
let's-
exactly, there is
Yeah.
now a state code of ethics.
the policies and procedures, are located on the VEPSI website. They have been provided to you for today. The council would recommend that 4A and B be struck.
In which sections?
That would be in section
Section 4, right?
4, yeah,
Okay.
under it's on page,
Oh,
it's my page 4 of 10.
Let's, we do have just one more.
4A and
So I'm gonna have to.
Yep, and then, so with respect to the executive session, the bill would require the executive branch economist to be present in order to go into executive session. Pursuant to the open meeting law, 1 VSA 313B, the board may choose to invite into executive session any of the following: legal counsel, staff, clerical assistants, and persons who are subjects of the discussion or whose information is needed. Legislating that the executive branch economists shall be in these meetings for executive session takes away important decision-making abilities from the council. It is the first instance where a change to open meeting law is being proposed that would require a person outside of the council to be present in all executive sessions. And for this reason, we would ask that this language be struck.
Okay, do you have any other word points?
I've got 2 more points. I'll go quickly. The JFO cost benefit model would require the council to contract with the the executive branch economist to perform the cost benefit analysis, and would also require JFO's review if over $1 million. VEPSI understands that the cost benefit model is a complex model. We also understand that the legislature values and trusts this model. The legislature also values and trusts that the executive branch economists run the model. The council currently relies on ACCD for administrative support. This administrative support includes entering into contractual agreements. The council does not enter into those contracts. Currently, AOA and ACCD contract with the executive branch economists to perform the cost benefit analysis for VEGI and TIP. For those reasons, the council suggests striking section C1, as operationally, the council cannot enter into contracts and relies on ACCD for this support.
Were these are you bringing this forward with consensus or unanimity from the?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
unanimity
Yeah.
from the council, okay.
Yes.
Well, except,
Because, well,
yeah, I was like,
the council, I mean, we can't do what we're not authorized to do.
Right,
And we're not authorized to enter into contracts. So
right.
So ACC does that.
last point, the strategic plan. I am just seeing the new language for the strategic plan. But I would say that Pepsi, is not the proper vehicle to be making policy recommendations based on statewide economic conditions. Pepsi can, however, provide support and assistance in the strategic planning process and has invaluable council members who are volunteers to help with this work. The council sees the value to the state of Vermont and to the future of economic development in our state. The current legislation asks the council to report on the purpose and performance of all state-funded economic development incentive programs. This is a very large undertaking that would require significant resources beyond the current scope of our council. This bill has no appropriation for this project, and this project would require a dedicated full-time staff member. We do appreciate that the recommended 5-year timeline seems more reasonable for this type of long-range planning. And then lastly, I think that it would be helpful for tax to talk to you about some of the reporting and the language around that. And then the council also does believe that the repeal of the sunset is necessary because it would give confidence to businesses that are thinking about relocating to Vermont. And it would send the signal that Vermont is serious about supporting business and economic development.
Okay, so we thank you.
You're welcome.
We have to end, we're already behind on data privacy. What I'm gonna say is, I think no one outright disagrees with anything you've said. We're also trying to meet the other body halfway so that we can preserve the big picture pieces, but you've made a good case. I think we just need to work it out a little bit outside of committee and come back with a draft. And it sounds like people do want Commissioner Bolio into committee to talk more about this. So we'll put this on the agenda for next week with new language, Rick, whoever from ACCD, and the commissioner. But in the meantime, Senator Harrison is going to take the lead on this language.
Okay, and I'll work
with Senator Clarkson.
Yeah.
With anybody, but it's just to,
Okay.
we don't have time to
Whoever
whoever
wants.
wants now.
And I'm happy to do that and also to come back and
Great.
speak in the future.
What
about
more
that.
importantly is working with the committee.
That's great.
Okay.
And Rick, yeah.
Right.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks so
you for
much.
having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming all the way. Good to have you in person.
Yes.
Happy to be here.
So I'm gonna ask Jessica Barquist, is she in person, to get in the witness chair? And I'm gonna say this, we have the Attorney General for half an hour at 10:20. We may not need the full half hour, but that is a big chunk of this time. So we are asking that everybody else limit their comments to 3 minutes. You might have something written, but I'm gonna stop you at 3 minutes because we have a crunch. I will also say to the healthcare folks, and actually, let me say really generally, this bill has changed. We don't have the new draft yet. John Gray, because of timing with Ledge Council, is coming in after you all speak. It does significantly curtail the private right of action focused on businesses whose gross revenue is majority selling or buying data. So more the data brokers are facing the private right of action. So if that takes care of some of your concern, please skip that part. Or you can just say, we like that, and that gives the committee some indication of the direction we're probably going to move, because that's just my draft that I'm presenting to the committee. And I want to get this bill out in enough time to give it a few days in the Health and Welfare Committee because Senator Lyons cares a lot about the healthcare industry, but also biometric data, et cetera. So I understand there may be reasons to give an additional exemption to healthcare entities that are regulated under a different set of constraints. And I'd be asking Senator Lyons to look at that with you all. So with that, I am timing things. And Jessica, you have your 3 minutes, and then you probably have time for one question each.
I will be very brief. Jessica Barquist, I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood New England and Planned Parenthood Vermont Action Fund. Broadly, we serve about 16,000 people in Vermont at our 7 centers, and we provide about 800,000 in free and discounted care every year to our communities. We believe that all people deserve to have access to comprehensive reproductive health care, including abortion and gender affirming care, free from shame, stigma, or intimidation. And the fall of Roe has had some really devastating impacts that have disproportionately impacted some of our more marginalized communities. And these individuals and really all of us need to be able to access our essential health care without fearing for our safety or our privacy. And protections for our personal health and health-related information is an increasingly important component of that. I'm going to let my other healthcare colleagues talk about the personal health information and the protected entity stuff, but we are in alignment with them. But what I am really here to talk to you all about is the geofencing provision and why that is so critical. So just to kind of put it into context, our health data and our personal health data that's not HIPAA protected is already being targeted in this country. In Mississippi, a woman was prosecuted for murder after experiencing a pregnancy loss based on cell phone information that she searched online for medication abortion information. So in our new reality in this nation, abortion is being criminalized and cell phone data is being used to identify, threaten, and prosecute those in healthcare. In 2021, Flow Health, which is one of the most popular period tracking apps, settled with the FTC over allegations that it shared health information on its 100 million users with third-party data analytics firms. So the term geofencing refers to targeted location-based marketing and advertising that allows the application to define a set geographic perimeter around a location in order to send ads to the user based on those location data signals derived from their cell phone.
You do have 1 more minute.
This does not address location-based check-in services for your healthcare doctor or sharing of information between your healthcare provider and your insurance company. It narrowly applies to apps, websites, and devices being programmed to send advertisement and messages to individuals when they enter a specific location. This tactic is frequently used by digital advertisers and has been leveraged by anti-abortion groups to target and bombard people seeking reproductive health care. So this bill would not restrict this practice of targeted advertisement anywhere except for at our healthcare providers. And this tactic is already being used to target Planned Parenthoods. In 2015, geolocation data was used to identify visitors at 140 abortion clinics in order to send them anti-abortion advertising. In 2022, a local data broker sold aggregate location data of people who visited abortion clinics, including more than 600 Planned Parenthoods over a 1-week period for just $160.
Okay. I'm gonna see if there's one question, if we have time for one question.
Yeah.
And have you sent your,
I will send
testimony
it.
to-
Okay.
after everybody sent their
There's no-
testimony?
That was the basis of my testimony, and we just think this is such a
Then-
critical component.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I was wondering if there was a problem in Vermont, but what if you're looking at sending information? So not sure that could be.
Yeah, and as more people come to the state, from states where abortion is criminalized, it's really imperative for us to protect their information.
Yeah, and just geolocation exists here, just you can buy ads on Facebook that are based on where a car is driving, so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
the
here.
concern is whether or not there are other activities in the building or in that geofenced area that there may be a reason other than the protected activity that you're talking about.
This is,
Does this pose a restriction that affects people who are not engaged in the kind of behavior that you're trying to solve?
no,
In Vermont, where you have a Planned Parenthood facility, typically is in a single building with a little bit of grass around it, as opposed to in a city in which it may be one office in a building that has a variety of things in it.
absolutely. So this only prohibits the targeted advertisement on the basis of them going into that location,
Into that building.
into
The
the
entrance.
1,700 feet around the health center, yeah.
And that's my point, is that you may have a health center located within a larger building that has many other kinds of activities in it.
Not so much.
Not so much in Vermont, but do you know where every Planned Parenthood center or every facility that provides, say, abortion services may be in Vermont?
Yeah, but I wouldn't mind having my, not being targeted for
You may.
entering that building for any of the other
But
businesses.
if it's not for a prohibited use or not for a use that we're trying to control, a harm that we're trying to prevent, my concern is whether or not we are imposing a restriction that does not need to be imposed on everyone. Do you have any comment on
You
that?
can respond to that, and Senator Brock, if you wanna work.
I think that the risk of having folks targeted based on trying to access sensitive healthcare far outweighs any potential concern about a prohibition on advertisement within a specific location. If they're entering your business, you can, develop a data relationship with them and provide them advertisement in that way too. It doesn't have to be done through a geofencing.
Right.
Okay, thanks so much, Jessica. With Sarah, Jessa, and Devin, is there like one overriding concern, or do you all have different, maybe?
I don't know about Sarah, just and I can.
Okay,
Fine.
okay, Sarah, do you wanna take your 3
I'll be
minutes?
super quick.
Thank you, you always are, appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Sarah Teachout, Government Relations with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont. As you know, we maintain databases with very sensitive personal health information. We're also governed by HIPAA and many, many other statutes. So I just wanted to say we really need to keep in the legislation in the
Okay.
next draft the exemption for HIPAA data,
Okay.
as well as the DFR enforcement that allows other data that Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont has in our possession to be also enforced in the same way, even
Mhm.
DFR. We are concerned about the private right of action and
Okay.
frivolous lawsuits, so that's
Yeah.
all I'll say on that one. And then the last piece that's a little bit outside this bill, but I feel that I need to say it, this bill excludes government from all of these
Yes,
protections.
right.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont is mandated to share our data identified with
Mhm.
state government.
Wait,
We have a lot of concerns about what's happening.
yeah,
So I have to say that.
I think
and
that's
put
important.
that-
Yeah,
The banks, we had a deal with the banks, we wanted them to share data, and we couldn't meet their privacy criteria.
Right,
And they
yeah.
refused.
yes, good point, one question.
One question.
Yeah,
Is it possible to tell with medical data in particular, if data has been received through a HIPAA process versus received another way? Is there some sort of marker that's put on it?
So at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont, we treat it all like HIPAA data.
Okay.
We don't separate out, some data versus others.
Right.
Once it's generally combined within our organization, so it's all treated like HIPAA by Blue Cross.
okay, thank you
Okay.
so much.
Yep.
And again, Health and Welfare may wanna talk to you as well, but
I'll be there.
great. Jessa and Devin, so it's like you can share this.
Yes, I think we can tag team. Thanks so much for giving us a few minutes. We
Yeah.
will significantly condense our points. It's
Thank
great to
you.
hear that Senate Health and Welfare will be taking this up
Yes.
further. I'm Jessa Barnard with the Vermont Medical Society. We represent physicians, physician practices.
Debbie Green with the Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems. We represent all of Vermont hospitals, which are all nonprofit.
And we are actually here on behalf of a coalition of organizations. So we submitted written testimony, encourage you to look at the list of, it's home health, it's adult days, the VAs. So it's a lot of healthcare entities. We will focus more again on Senate Health and Welfare, but I do want to just pull out a couple of points that I think are unique from other witnesses you've heard. One thing I want to point out, we hear a lot of concern, especially with healthcare data, about cybersecurity. Your body passed a great cybersecurity bill last session that we think sets up a really great process of developing and sharing best practices, looking at models, where are existing regulations not sufficient, where can we tighten them up? It really takes a collaborative kind of educational approach. So just putting that out, and this, as you know, this bill doesn't even really touch on cybersecurity, which is in fact maybe one of the bigger areas we should be talking about. So just mentioning that.
Yeah, we can address the bill, last year's bill at another point.
Yes,
I think
no,
we
right.
can update that. That's.
Yes, exactly, yes. And so I will save all of my what HIPAA is, how it works, how it's health and welfare, but just to say there are a lot of privacy regulations that already apply to healthcare. One of our concerns with the way the bill is currently drafted and the exemption is currently drafted is it actually still creates a lot of work, especially for small entities, to almost now go through a 3-step process. What data is already covered by HIPAA? What data is
Okay, that's entirely fair.
what data is not? Can we protect that data the way HIPAA requires us to protect it? If not, how is it covered under 121? And we're concerned that even if there are guidelines, educational materials put out there, they will not be that granular. People will have to hire consultants, attorneys to really help them go through, this is the data I have, this is how I store it, this is which bucket it falls in. So skipping to what we therefore are asking for, and I will again say, so we are looking for an entity-based exemption. We will talk more about that in Senate Health and Welfare.
Yeah.
Some things that I think apply more broadly.
Mhm.
We would very much encourage raising the threshold of applicability of the number of consumers.
That is also in our new
Also,
draft.
Okay,
At
thank
the
you.
25,000. So,
That will definitely help, thank
Okay,
you, we
yeah.
appreciate that. One nuance to that,
Yeah.
we would request that if there are entities that have records exempt under the exemptions, those
yeah.
don't count towards that applicability.
Interesting.
Because here's the issue.
Yeah.
Take 2 nonprofits, take a nature center and a home health agency.
Yeah.
The nature center can have a donor list, a volunteer list that could be up to that 25,000 cap. You get a small healthcare agency, we are actually required to save patient records for at least 7 years. We could easily hit that threshold and then have no other capacity for those things like an email list, a volunteer list.
Right.
So could that 25,000, if you're looking at that, not count exempt? If we're doing a data exemption, not entity exemption, exempt that data that is, exempt the data that's exempt from the applicability.
Right. Do you see needing an industry level exemption or what we did similar to the energy folks, which is if you're regulated, if this data is regulated under this other,
We
Regulation.
sort of have, that is kind of what came out of the House, which is if you treat the data under HIPAA, if you treat the
Okay.
data, if you protect it like it's protected under HIPAA,
yeah,
that data is exempt. So say it's not officially defined as HIPAA data, say you have a donor list, but you treat it with the same protections as HIPAA, it actually could be exempt. The tricky thing is we are trying to figure out how to actually do that. Does that mean we have to give a HIPAA notice of privacy practices to each of our
Right.
donors? It's
Yeah.
sort of fitting, or
Volunteers
volunteers, it's kind of
I get
fitting a square peg into a round hole,
Yeah.
like, would we then have to modify our HIPAA notices so it actually doesn't really fit? Would we have to tell donors you can opt out of being listed on the website, which is fine, most of us do that already,
Right.
but would you need a HIPAA notice to do that? So it's still, we're still not quite, I don't think that exemption is quite there.
okay,
That's the problem, because it is based on how you treat the data, not the
Yeah.
entity. So we really are
Okay.
looking for an industry, well,
okay,
industry meaning if you are a HIPAA covered entity with the
We're
kind of
looking
thing,
at an entity.
an entity exemption with the caveat that we would say, as long as your operations are related to your functions as a covered entity.
Right.
We don't, because there are big actors out there, say like Amazon, that are largely selling goods, but yet they have some healthcare, now they're doing telehealth.
right,
So we don't want them to be able to say, oh, look, we have this little healthcare
Yeah.
function over here, we're entirely exempt.
right,
It's if you
okay.
are a healthcare entity
Yeah,
and you're treating that data, you are covered by.
that's really helpful. I think we'll contemplate
We'll
it
say-
and we'll pass
yes.
it to
Um,
health and welfare.
One other
Yeah.
thing that I don't think I haven't heard all the witnesses, is treating volunteer data like employee data. So we know there's an exemption for the definition of consumer for employees. We have a lot of organizations that are in fact, hospice is required to use volunteers, they
Right.
use them like employees.
Yeah.
That would fit in with our nonprofit concern.
It's
Yeah.
not just healthcare, it is nonprofits in general, we just happen to be speaking on behalf of healthcare, that
Yeah.
could volunteers, especially if you treat that data like employee data,
Yeah,
could they be under that definition?
Well, especially because sometimes our volunteers come under the concern of emergency, like during COVID, we used
Right.
the medical reserve corps, and
Yeah.
those folks aren't our employees, but
right.
we need to mobilize them quickly, and so we
Yeah.
can't,
Well, we will, I think we need to think about that as a committee because it affects all nonprofits. So you've raised some good concerns for us to think about generally.
Just all in written testimony.
Yeah, all of it is great. And it gives us, we want to have a working understanding of your concerns here to talk to health and welfare, but we do want them to have full time with the bill.
Great.
Do the like healthcare folks have concerns about the biometric data pieces? Because under the private right of action on biometric data in Illinois, I understand nursing homes were sued, other kind of like care entities dealt with biometric data.
I heard that for the first time from listening to the prior witness. I have not had time to
Okay.
explore that further. I
Okay.
imagine we could have some
Yeah.
thoughts on that once we kind of figure out what the actual issue.
I'm gonna try to pass some of those concerns to health and welfare, so I would encourage your folks to be thinking about biometric data by the time it gets to health and welfare as well. Right.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joe Carton, hello.
Hello there.
We've truncated everyone because we have the Attorney General at 10:20. So hoping you can speak for 5 or so minutes and then we'll take.
Sure. My name is Joe Carton. I operate the Westport Hospitality in Burlington, Vermont. We employ about 180 employees. We operate Hotel Vermont and the Marriott Corporate. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about H21 and how reading it, and I didn't get through all 80 pages. But the unintended consequences, perhaps, for small inns and lodges and hospitality-oriented businesses. As I've been in business long enough before the internet, and we would publish 100,000 brochures, send them out to the direct mail campaign, and I'm sure 90% of them ended up in waste. And it was an expensive venture. And then the internet leveled the playing field for small inns and lodges, and that you could garner the information, you could be more precise, be accurate with who you're talking to. And then you could compete with the Hiltons and the Marriotts and the Expedias and things like that. What happens today is that we can communicate directly with a guest, give them exactly what they want, the right time, the right price, the right offer, through the data collection that we've identified. But all of a sudden, if we can't do that, then you've got to give more of your inventory to Expedia, for instance, where you have to pay them a 17 to 20% commission just to carry your product or sell your product with others. So to try to limit that, because it's the highest cost of sales for a hotel company or anything.
So your concern is it's limiting your ability to privately market.
To do targeted advertising.
Targeted
Targeted marketing
Yeah.
to your own database as opposed to having to use another
Is it the
option in the private.
From what you've read, is it, because I had the same question about targeted advertising, it's good for small businesses and it's generally good for the consumer.
It's the least expensive
Right.
way too.
Is it the concern about how targeted advertising is limited in the bill or the private right of action related to?
Well, I wanted to mention that private right of action.
And
as well.
we're changing that significantly so that it only applies to those who buy or sell data as a majority of their gross revenue.
Okay.
Don't imagine that fits, but I am asking myself if that fits you all, but I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But it would be a
Hopefully.
great time,
Right.
wasted time of money and energy to, for $1,000 to get sued for it and to
That's
fight
right. Yes,
against that.
absolutely.
It's sad. State of
Right.
affairs we have to do
But
that.
if you all are the people who are representing, I have looked at the targeted advertising piece and really felt like that section of the bill still might be too heavy-handed because target advertising, our small businesses are telling us that is the best way to reach their customer,
Right.
period.
Yeah.
So it.
Without a huge shock
Exactly. If
value.
anyone in the room has language, just has changes that they think help in the targeted advertising.
Right, but our only concern is, they can use their targeted advertising with their customers as they want. And the concern is how do they then sell or use that data that they have?
Well, they
Oh,
might
yeah.
purchase data to do
Right, but
targeted.
then they're not their own data. They then purchasing other people's data.
So we don't
This is,
sell
I
our
don't even
data.
know.
Right,
you know, the
is that
mechanics.
what you're doing?
No, we don't sell data.
See?
Right.
So when you send
Right.
out emails,
We, for
do,
special events,
do you send them out through a data broker?
no, we
or-
have our own.
So so it's like Marriott's list.
And you protect it.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
so is it your local list or is it Marriott's list?
Well,
Or
we have two interestingly, two separate entities. We have
Okay.
a hotel that's an independent hotel, Hotel
Right.
Vermont.
Great
We do it
hotel.
all
Right,
ourselves.
right.
And we have our own database, 30,000 names that
Yeah.
we solicit for through.
And it's its
And
own
then-
community.
Yes, and then we are a franchise of Marriott Hotel and
There you get into more challenges. I mean, just,
yeah.
Well,
we-
maybe more
certainly cross
opportunities though,
state-
because they have a data
Cross
system, I'm
state
sure,
lines.
you know.
well, it's owned by
Yeah.
the Mormons, so you hope that it's, covered in some capacity.
Well, ironically, it's 98% of all hotels are owned by individuals like us, and they're just a
Right,
marketing company.
especially Indians.
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
so, just, it'd be really helpful to understand the specifics. So if a customer opts out,
Yes.
if they get your email,
Unsubscribe.
it's probably different whether it's Hotel Vermont and Marriott. Do you let them, or does the
Yes.
system,
Yes, allow you to opt out, yes.
okay, so their data is probably still there, but it says like, do not contact or something?
Right, it just says unsubscribe.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Is there any interaction between the Hotel Vermont database and the Marriott database?
No,
In terms of your use of it, do you intermingle that in any way in terms of advertising, promotion, or things that you send out through your database and
No.
through your facilities?
no.
Do you feed anything from Hotel Vermont into Marriott,
Do we feed anything?
the data?
No, we try to cross-sell,
Mhm,
that entity, that
mhm,
campus, if you will.
right.
Yeah.
But the
But
data
if
from
they-
Hotel Vermont does not go
Not
to
feed
Marriott
it,
in
no,
any
it
way.
does not, no, they're probably totally separate, as part of a franchise agreement.
Right, right.
So do you have it, do you outsource any of your privacy management or data management? I mean, you aren't managing that all necessarily in-house. Do you do, because there are many companies who outsource through ISO or SOX or whatever, that, there are lots of ways to outsource your data management.
Well, like your payment system, which is I think already exempt.
So like Salesforce, I mean,
Yeah, we have some source.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you do
That's all.
outsource your data management.
For sales and marketing
right.
use,
Okay, but so you're using somebody that already has a very strong
privacy, yes.
otherwise you probably wouldn't be contracted.
Right.
Right.
So there, the concern would likely be the private right of action. If Salesforce has a data breach, somebody could come after all of its victims, but
Mhm.
use Salesforce.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, that's
It
yeah.
does. That's one of the
Business
things
having
we're
interest in
looking at.
data privacy.
Well, we're looking at how do we create safe harbors for companies that are already managing their data in thoughtful ways and are
Mhm.
outsourcing that management through respected and trusted
Sources.
sources.
Would an ongoing data assessment that's on file be an additional burden?
It kind of, yes, I'm sure it would be, quite frankly, but I don't know what that entails.
Right. Neither do we. So.
Sorry, what was your question?
Well, there's a piece in the bill from what I understand, and again, I think we're trying to understand, so we can help businesses understand. That there's a data assessment you would at least be required to keep on file at all
Right.
times. And I don't know what that means, I'm
Right.
gonna ask the Attorney General, but that came out of our kids code bill because it was seen as kind of onerous and revenue that the business would have to spend on something that no one may ever look at or would only look at if they wanted to sue them for something.
Right. And actually, that could be something that Salesforce would do.
Absolutely.
Or
Third party.
Right.
Well, I'm sure, we'll talk to
Exactly.
others, I have some heads nodding and not
Yeah.
nodding. But I would imagine that these big data brokers and tell you they're certified under X, Y, or Z privacy management scheme, so.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Right,
And hopefully they're compliant.
right.
those we need to understand more fully.
Right.
Anything else, Joe?
Well, it's good to hear that the right of action is being reviewed.
Yeah,
I think that's very onerous.
Yeah.
And for small businesses.
Yeah.
That data is just so important.
Right.
Talk to the right person at the right time. without
Yes.
Spending thousands and thousands of dollars, wasted time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and it sounds like you're doing a significant amount of data management, not necessarily just yourselves and through the companies that
Through
you
the third
contract
parties.
with to do that.
yes.
Right.
So that is,
And it's really helpful to hear, I mean, you operate a franchised business.
Right.
that could probably buy into certain systems as needed or desired. And then you have Hotel Vermont, which is a local staple, you know, it's become a gem. I mean, not that the Marriott isn't, but you know, it's become this real brand, Vermont branded, local operation that people really look forward
So
to.
did you create it?
We did.
So, well, so you're the original owners, I don't know that, I mean, I don't live in Groveland.
With others.
I have no idea.
With others.
No, it's beautiful.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
Appreciate your efforts.
Yeah.
I don't think you might have to go back and do other things, but you know, we're gonna be talking about this, I think, as we look at the language at 11. So we have limited time and we wanna get this done on the welfare, but we also don't wanna take people by surprise. So I will just say, again, I am proposing changes to the committee that we'll look at 11. And this information is all informing that. So that's, you know, that's helpful for everyone to hear, I think, but I don't wanna, if anything changes, we're gonna try to let people know so that we can discuss further. Because we hear that was sort of part of the issue
Mhm.
in the House, as things changed at the last minute.
Oh, and didn't get a chance for
Right.
discussion.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. J. Mitchell, are you fully online or? Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Hi, so you have about 8 minutes. So you can divide that between questions and testimony or up to you.
Well, good morning and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk to the committee about H121. My name again is Mitchell J. I represent the VADA, the Vermont Automotive Distributors Association, a trade association here in Vermont that represents all of our new franchise motor vehicle dealers and many of our used car dealers. I've got about 30 years of experience, own 2 new car stores that I finally sold in 2022 and still operate 2 small family-owned used car stores with my daughter, employing about 12 people in Montpelier and White River Junction. I got to say, as a small local business, I really believe H21 is going to put us neatly at a regional disadvantage in some cases. And I get concerned sometimes that, and I'm trying to shorten this up to make it quick for you. I get concerned sometimes that when we make these too cumbersome, that we actually reduce the amount of privacy that customers have, and we certainly reduce customer satisfaction. I think that simply put, H21 sometimes makes it easier for us to do business with customers in our neighboring state than in our own state. I still find some of the definitions of biometric data, precise geolocation data, the word sales sensitive data, loyalty programs cumbersome, but because of the time constraint, I'm just going to try to go through it fairly quick. Much like the previous testimony before us, we maintain a lot of customer data, a lot of private data in our industry, just because of the amount of work that we do helping people obtain financing, our interaction with state government, with the Department of Motor Vehicles, where we collect a lot of private information in order to present that registration information to the government. We have products such as credit life insurance that collects personal information, and we have a lot of regulations such as GLB at the federal level that regulates what we do, FCC regulations on how we handle it, regulations going back again with credit life with DFR in Vermont. So, you know, I always look at these and get concerned about those overlapping regulations. And I got to say that certainly relooking at the private right of action takes away a lot of my concerns today, and I appreciate looking at that. Similar to what you heard from the last person, we talk about the hotel industry as new car dealers. We have to share a certain amount of that private information with the manufacturers in order to do warranty work, vehicle recalls with manufacturers. We have banks that we have to share information with in order to make sure that we have that when we're selling the contract, that the people are actually who they say they are. Red flag rules, driver's license with a local Vermont credit union will want to have as part of the package. And so without going into it a lot, because I know time is very short for you and you may have questions, but I mean, I think those are some of our things is, the targeted advertising, making loyalty programs so burdensome, that instead you don't offer them and stuff. So, I'd urge the committee not to pass H21 in its current form, but to understand how it'll work in the real world and make changes necessary to give Vermonters and our local small businesses the opportunity to embrace new technologies while still having well-defined, reasonable privacy protections. So I don't know if you have any quick questions, but I tried to keep it really brief and we can follow up later on if you have any.
Senator, thank you very much for being here. It's really helpful to talk to the folks who are actually doing the work. I have heard that it's been written that GM sells customer data without the customer's knowledge about driving habits, especially to insurance companies. Is that something that's happening in Vermont?
Well, I think we don't really know sometimes what's happening with some of that data. And a lot of times, some of that data the manufacturers are gathering does not necessarily come from the dealership, like you said, but it comes from things like I want to call it a radio, but today it's more like a communication center. And customers basically sometimes sign up for services that I'm not sure that they quite understand. But it is out there. And I got to say, it's, I know several years ago, I had a couple cars that got misappropriated from the dealership by outside people who were stolen.
Great.
We were worrying about how to get them. And I happened to say to my daughter, can you call Sirius XM and see if there's any way they can actually locate those radios? They must know where they are. They turn them on and off. And sure enough, a simple form that we had to have our Berlin Police Department, and within 5 minutes, they knew where the cars were exactly and everything. So
it's very useful in certain circumstances. Mitchell, if I may ask, who managed it?
Oh, no, it's Mitchell J. Okay, sorry.
Mitchell
That's
J.
That's me.
Isn't that your name? Yes.
The double first name.
No, just a question. You operate, you're a franchise owner of some huge companies. So I assume you don't manage all your data yourself. You outsource your data management, I assume some of that, and rely on GM and Chrysler Dodge and to manage some of it as well. How do you outsource that data, and who do you outsource it to? And do you trust their data privacy systems?
Well, I will say that as a used car dealer now, I outsource it and I feel like I have a little bit more control because I use large companies that specialize in customer relation management software or dealer management systems from one of the top 4 companies that are out there in the industry that really make sure they've got this locked down safe. I will say that when I was a franchise new car dealer, I was not always quite as comfortable. I'm sure that General Motors and Stellantis and Ford and Toyota have very robust security systems, but I think as privacy's come up, one of the ways that they've moved around it still was they would require, and I mean, they have this huge hammer and an incredible amount of pressure they put on a franchise dealer to say, sign our data agreement. And in the case of one of my manufacturers, when I had the store, that data agreement basically was I was going to share about everything under the sun with them. And then in return, they were going to market for me exclusively. But I had some concerns that some of that marketing had my dealership in a very small name down in the corner of that ad, but the word Jeep or something was plastered all over the ad. So, I mean, I think they're secure, but again, I always had some concerns with what happens with that data. And there is such a, it's like David and Goliath with trying to control that when you have manufacturers.
Right. And you don't necessarily fully appreciate in that capacity what they're doing with that data.
No.
I mean, the bank, obviously the banks for the loans, one assumes that is being managed pretty well. And, right, thanks.
That's really helpful.
So what kind of, the bank has my financials, I'm confident there. So I bought a new Toyota and it's green. And I bought 3 Toyotas from you in the past. What other kind of information do you have on me that you can share with them?
All this stuff.
Well, so the manufacturer, and I can't speak for all of them, and I will say from my position with 8 years on the National Auto Dealer Association board, we had manufacturers that were a little bit more willing to work with dealers and try to listen to concerns, and we had other ones that were more totalitarian. One of my concerns is with some of those marketing agreements, because they're getting the data under the form of saying, we're going to help market for you. So if you bought 3 Toyotas and let's say you financed them, they're looking to find out what kind of monthly payment you had, how long the term of that loan was. I've seen some of those data agreements ask for your interest rate, because what they say is, we'll now be able to market you for you. They keep putting it as for you. We'll be able to market that customer, and we'll understand that if their interest rate was maybe a B type rate, that when we market an offer to them in 3 years, we're going to use a B type interest rate, and we'll be offering them an offer on a similar car. So they're incredibly sophisticated in what they get. And I know one of my concerns was I could never get them to give me a list of exactly what they were going to pull out of my system. So.
And credit scores are affected by how people pay their car payments and some of that information. So that's going somewhere.
And just a quick thing. So they could also sell that data to somebody else.
Yeah.
So even if that data is not valuable to them right there, then they could sell that data. And so,
Well,
and then we have geolocation data.
Yeah, most of those agreements. Whoops, sorry. Most of those agreements, I will say, really limited their ability to sell the data. But what it wouldn't limit was them to aggregate the data. And aggregated data, so that they would be able to, let's say, people in Washington County or Vermont tend to fall in this broad range of credit scores, or tend to like this type of vehicle. So I will say they didn't really take, they collected a ton of data, but they did say that they would not sell that data unless it was aggregate data. So.
Okay.
That's helpful. So, and de-identified data has its own section of the bill, and it's harder to get at for regulation.
I will say real quickly, I mean, earlier it was asked too about, data assessments. From car dealers' points of view, we've been required to do a lot of that work over the last 2 or 3 years, and it is not inexpensive.
Yeah.
For a small dealership like mine, the data assessments I have to do to meet some of the rules at the federal level, to make sure we're protecting data, we need to get. It's more complicated in this bill, because we need to make sure that our vendors are using good data management, test our systems. We're talking anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000, $60,000 per rooftop.
Per what?
Ongoing, and then ongoing costs too that can run $20,000, $25,000 a year. So.
Okay.
It's quite a burden for a small business.
Yeah. Can you give that a percentage of your operating costs? Or is that, you don't have to, I don't know, some ballpark, like, we're trying to get a sense of what this will cost a lot of small businesses.
Well, how much more are we? That, if he's gotta do this now for federal.
Right,
They have to be adding on.
Yeah.
He may be managing his data already and paying for that.
Yeah.
And
I think in the case of a car dealer, you're correct. In the case of a car dealer, we're probably already doing it. We absorb it anyhow. But for other businesses, it can be a pretty substantial cost for other small Vermont businesses, especially that small 1-2 person operation.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was driving at, is we're hearing different percentage of costs, both the first year and ongoing, that a data assessment might end up charging, costing up a small business. Any other questions for Mr. J? Not
Mitchell. I love it. It's great.
Thank you so much. This has been really helpful.
All right, thank you
I
for
love
giving us
it.
the opportunity.
Well, thank you for the misappropriated notion of a car. I love that.
Yeah. And feel free to send us written testimony.
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
Absolutely.
thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Madam Attorney General. Do you have a hard stop?
No,
Okay. I mean, we have some time constraints, but I think this is sort of an important piece of the conversation.
yeah. Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for taking up this bill for starters. We are consumer experts in our office and feel really strongly about data privacy for a number of reasons. I wanted to begin by just touching a little bit about the Data Breach Notification Act. One of the reasons why we feel strongly about data is because the notification, this comes to our office, we're the ones notified. And we know that roughly on average, if you look at a full year, every day we receive between 1 and 3 notifications of the data breach. So extremely common. Some people say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And the other thing that's I find noteworthy is the quantity of Vermonters who are impacted. Every year between roughly 150,000 to 250,000 Vermonters are impacted. We've only 640,000 Vermonters. So every single year, a huge percentage of us are impacted by data breaches. So all the work that you all do regulating data privacy has real world impacts that are immediate on Vermonters.
Do you have any metrics on those data breaches, the size of the organization, whether it's a Vermont located business or a national business?
Yes.
And what in this bill would you see remedying that number of data breaches?
Well, it's not necessarily the number, although the data minimization will have a huge impact. Actually, that's part of it. So when you think about the data that we keep, when we did this with our own website, we were like, why are we holding data on our website? We don't need this.
I do want to ask you, people have expressed, why is government exempt from this? So some of the data breaches you were getting complaints about, maybe our own, like the Department of Labor, for example.
One with mine.
Well, Equifax, I mean, just look at how many Vermonters were affected by Equifax.
Like half.
Right, then over back.
We received over
But the
1,000 phone calls on Equifax. I was an assistant attorney general at the time. I was answering calls to help Vermonters during that crisis. So in other words, no one has to even notify us if they don't have data that is, equals the PII that would require them to make. So we actually field calls from businesses who experience like lowercase data breach that doesn't meet the qualification or the criteria for notifying us because they were good about their data minimization. That sort of as a theory, it's a best practice that this bill is codifying.
So some of those are, do you have a percentage of Vermont businesses?
Not off the top of my head, but we can follow up.
Thank you.
I will say that
Do you have a sense of who these companies are? Like
it's
financial companies?
completely runs the gamut.
That-
Completely. It's small businesses, it's big businesses, it's sophisticated businesses, it's unsophisticated businesses.
And some are required to tell you and some are not.
Well, it depends on the data that was breached. So if they don't have your social security number and your name and your address, and it's just like, we had a data breach and they got one, like, first names. Okay, that's obviously not a problem, and people will call us and we'll be like, yeah, good news, you had great data hygiene, and now you're not in this position where you're, vulnerable to getting.
So appreciating data hygiene. That's another word. Misappropriated cars and data hygiene. Data, what do you mean by data minimization? When you say there's a best practice already modeled somewhere.
Yeah.
What is that? And is the private sector actually already solving that problem by creating these companies that manage data really well? Is that what you mean by data minimization, that a company would keep it?
Think about in your own, own life. Have you ever been asked for your social security number and you're thinking, why are you asking me for my social security number? I'm not giving it to you. That happens to me all the time. I never give out I remember when I got cable, they were like, we need your social security number. I was like, why? Like for the modem, I was like, I'll come pick up the modem. I don't want to give that to you. That's data minimization. It's there's an actual definition, but it's not asking for data you don't need. it's eliminating data after you've used it for the purpose that you said you were gonna use it for, all those kinds of practices.
Do you recommend that? I mean, I guess I'm asking best practices. How do people know what the best practices are?
Well,
Who
this
rolls
is
that
one,
out?
this is
No,
one
I know
way-
this is, but currently do you partner with ACCD to let businesses know what the best
We have a
practices
small
are?
business advocate and we also provide, frankly, a lot of, I support is a strong word, but we field a lot of questions from people who have questions about the Data Breach Notification Act. We have guidances, so we do that work, but it is really important. I'm always like writing op-eds. I wrote an op-ed about data privacy when I was running for office. No one ran it. This was not a step.
But you're passionate.
I know, and I'm like, if only you knew what I knew. So yes, we do try to educate.
Did the small business advocate have a hand in helping to craft the direction of this bill?
I would say that I supervise the small business advocate and I co-wrote the initial bill, 4 years ago, I co-wrote.
Did you talk to small businesses and nonprofits?
Yes. We
What did you hear?
It wasn't me personally talking about this, it was the Assistant Attorney General who was assigned and worked on.
Okay,
data
but did
privacy.
you talk to any small businesses or nonprofits
About-
in Vermont about your passion for this? and
Yes,
the
oh,
direction?
yes.
So what was their feedback to
I mean,
you?
I think people, here's what I think. I think people who don't know, it's like all of this with like AI, where you're learning and your eyes are being open and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that, holy cow. And then there's people who had a data breach or some other concern, or they got their identity, an identity theft situation. And they realize what the impacts are, which I'll talk about in my
So
testimony.
it's your belief that pretty much all small businesses and nonprofits, if they serve over 6,000 people, which I would say is probably a majority of our businesses and nonprofits, should fall under a private right of action if they make a mistake in the multi-step process to meet the data assessment.
Yeah, a private right of action is saying to an individual, you have a right to protect your own data and to take action if someone has failed to protect your data. So I think that that's, empowering individuals to take ownership of their data and to be able to take action. I mean, a corollary is like, if I get hurt in some way, do I rely on someone else to take action? Or should I have my own remedy?
Senator Cummings.
Well, the concern I've heard from small businesses is there was a patent troll that was out, that there have been other instances in Vermont where an attorney can go out and just target small businesses because you aren't at the letter of the law. And that seems to be the fear, especially with small businesses, that they could get really shut down by some of these things. And they've happened in the past. And so I think that's the balance we're trying to strike. The other states don't have private right of action.
Well, before I was working in the Attorney General's office, I was in private practice. And they teach you right in law school, lawyers go for deep pockets. They don't target small businesses because they're there to make money. So just as a practical point, I mean, it's a valid concern, of course, but I don't.
Well, the data trolling did that. They went through and they said, you're, infringing on my pattern. It'll, pay us $25,000 now, and we're gonna take you to court.
Yeah, I don't think we can rely on sort of law school education to
Oh,
solve this
no,
one.
that's real.
I mean,
world.
we heard
That's
from
in the
King
real
Arthur
world.
Flower, Vermont Country
Yep.
Store, Orvis. These are businesses that have semi-deep pockets.
I
so-
totally agree, and there's always balancing acts,
That's
I totally appreciate that, I mean, from
So you
what
support
I
our
know.
change to the private right of action,
Yes.
so that it's
No.
limited to just those who buy or sell data as a majority of their revenue.
There are protections built into the bill from the House that, are trying to protect the small
Do
businesses.
you think they
who
do
don't-
that?
Yeah, I think that they do that.
Which one?
I think that there's probably a range, and we'll leave it to you, the policymakers, to decide what.
So you don't oppose that change to limit the private right of action to businesses that buy or sell data as over 50% of their gross revenue?
I leave it up to you. I think that it's
Okay.
important to have protections for small businesses. I just think where you draw the line on like the number of, consumers whose data you have and all of that, I don't.
So we
really-
set that at 25.
Yeah, I feel like I can, and also, I mean, even today, I'm so sorry that I wasn't here to hear all of the testimony. that
Okay, you could watch it.
I know,
It's-
later I can get.
I will
caught up.
just say, it's a lot of testimony, and
Yeah,
for whatever reason, the Commerce Committee in the House had no Vermont businesses on their witness list. We checked after a year and a half. And it sounds like you yourself haven't workshopped some of these things with small
in fact, in
businesses.
2020, we proposed in the House a bill that was a Biometric Information Privacy Act.
Mhm.
That dealt with data minimization, and we held a forum. And stakeholders who are sitting in this room were at the forum, including me, I moderated it. And at the forum, what we heard from almost everybody, except for Zach, including the Vermont, I'm blanking on their name.
That's right.
Tech Alliance was
Yeah.
there, and they said, this is moving too quickly, we need time. And we were like, you're right, and we had 3 forums and 4 years has passed. So that was directly in response to the Vermont Tech Alliance, who's, I forget. the
Did you
name, it was
propose
really
a private
articulate.
right of action
Yes.
and the threshold of 6,000?
No, we
users?
had no threshold, this
Okay.
is more
Okay.
friendly to small.
So I
business.
guess my question is, independent of numbers, I appreciate you saying this empowers individuals, the private right of action. Eh, Do you have a threshold, not numbers for the business, but do you have a threshold for the harm done that would justify a private right of action on an individual's part? Because I think one of the challenges that many businesses are concerned with is the frivolous nature of a possible action. And I get that. I also understand that empowering a number of individuals when there has been a serious harm is, and it's something we contemplate with Kids Code, serious harms that aren't necessarily financial. So I'd just love to know what your sort of threshold would be for a really private, an individual person's harm.
Well, first, let me say, in 2008, the first private right of action attached to the Biometric Information Privacy Act was passed. It was a long time ago, so there's probably data from Illinois. We hear about, you know, the
We heard about a lot of
350 million
lawsuits in Illinois.
Yeah, the $350 million Facebook lawsuit, which transformed Facebook. I don't know if you guys remember when they came out with like face mapping and you were like, oh my gosh, they knew who I am.
Mhm.
And they didn't have privacy protections, and that lawsuit really shaped how we all experience Facebook and by extension, Instagram and the other social media companies because of that effort. The other thing to keep in mind is there's a cure period attached to this bill.
We have
And the other thing to keep in mind is there are such things as frivolous lawsuits, but the courts have protections against that. There's attorneys are not permitted through the ethical rules to file those, and so there are also court protections that we should know. So I do think there's a lot of protections in place, including the cure period is not something that they have in Illinois. So, you know, to keep that
Did you
in
talk to
mind.
nonprofits
Yeah, we did talk to nonprofits over the years.
about the data privacy bill?
Mhm.
Did they express concerns to you?
Well, they're reflected in the bill. There's some exemptions and carve outs for nonprofits. in the
Okay.
bill.
But just so you're clear, when we got this bill, I don't know a nonprofit or business in the state of Vermont that has said that they agree with the private right of action, that they think the bill has enough protections against frivolous lawsuits. So are you saying for those reasons, you know, that we might have changed the bill, you are neutral on those changes?
No, I'm saying the philosophy I agree with, but in terms of like where to draw the line, I want to defer to the committee.
But you're not, you don't have an opinion?
willing to trust our work, I think what you said.
Yeah, I have an opinion about the philosophy, but I don't wanna, I'm willing to trust your work, it's nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly, you know, on one way or the other, and I think, you know, even here today, you probably got great feedback.
Okay.
On where that line should be, so I defer to.
Okay.
If you need us to come up with a more definite opinion, we can do that, if that's helpful too.
If the bill were to come out without a private right of action
That
at
was my
all,
next question.
how would you feel about it?
Sad, because we have a private right of action right now in the Consumer Protection Act. So it's something that already exists. So to create a bill that actually takes that away from consumers who are accustomed to having that.
Why did you need the private right of action section? Because when we did Kids Code, you said trust Title IX, you know, it's in there. This, for some reason, put a private right of action in the marquee, as I would say. but you didn't need that for the kids code. So why did you need it for this bill?
Well, kids code relates, and I'm trying to refresh, that was a while ago. This is just a different kind of bill. They overlap, which is great. But it handles different things. So, for this, which is an all-encompassing bill, or like comprehensive data privacy bill, it relates to all kinds of pockets about our data privacy that could impact people. And kids code is more specific, and I think that this captures more companies and holders of data.
I mean, for the most part, I would say, I'll just speak for myself, that kids code involves greater harms. I mean, we were talking about suicide and depression and, things that
This
are
also
almost
relates to
irreparable.
suicide and depression. Biometric information can be used in extremely damaging
So
ways.
I asked for a provision to be added to this bill that criminalizes deepfakes. I
Mhm.
think when you're talking about those level of harms, that we should look at criminal
Yes.
penalties,
You
not,
have asked for that. I would love to collaborate with you.
okay.
So we've made that
Hopefully
reflected as
gonna be
well.
in the next
In our
bill.
next draft.
But I
Okay.
think that's where I don't wanna cross a data breach and, some of what happens there with, very harmful, intentional, explicit, targeting of people that could result, I think something that results in suicide and, deep depression, we wanna criminalize those behaviors more than just blame a media company.
Well, I would say both. I mean, the good news, as I just described with Facebook, is
Well,
that
small media.
when you create, civil liability
Mhm.
for companies, or you're driving the market to change.
Mhm.
And so that's great. If someone creates a non-consensual deepfake pornography, I think of course, there's a place for a criminal statute. But when you create civil liability for a
Yes.
company that's facilitating the making of a non-consensual deepfake
Mhm.
pornography, you're changing the marketplace and protecting a lot of people. You're not just targeting the criminals who are creating these, you're targeting people who are like, dabbling in criminality. You're
Mhm.
targeting all of that. So it can be much more.
Where does
sweeping.
their revenue come from?
Who?
The companies that are creating deepfakes.
It could be, a subscription service, advertisement, or selling your data. And that, I want to get back to a little bit of the issue here, which is we all know data fuels the internet. We are living in a world where that is when we don't buy for things for our apps and our products that we get on the internet, it's because our data is being mined and sold. And advertising dollars are what fuels the internet. And anytime we go on a social media app and we've never purchased a thing from Facebook or Instagram or whatever, it's data. And without regulation, I'm taking a turn here, and I bet you're not going to anticipate, but without regulation, not only are consumers harmed, but the marketplace is harmed. And when I talk about the Consumer Protection Act and protecting consumers, I also know that we are protecting the marketplace. I have made this analogy before, but I know it will resonate with this committee. We used to live in an era, those of us who are older will remember, we used to live in an era where people would try to sell you things over the phone. And you might even buy them. There was a marketplace over the phone. And then robocalls were invented, and then scam robocalls shortly followed. And now who here even picks up their phone when it rings unless the number is someone you actually know?
Some of us have to. I mean, sadly.
You don't let it go to voicemail, Senator?
No, my job as a senator is to answer the phone.
Answer the
and
phone.
say-
It says spam. I
So you get,
Right.
yes, if it says
I don't
or
actually anymore
non-prompted or
look at
at
ID
the caller
because
ID.
you miss too many people. Too many people have area codes because they've moved here that don't live here. I mean, that now live
That's
here,
true.
but have their cell phones from an
That's
earlier
true.
life. And they come and those are constituents.
But generally,
In terms of the potential market and opportunities to buy and sell things over the phone.
If I can put a pin in something before you leave. Government and politics is a big culprit in terms of robocalls, and
But not scam robocalls.
I mean, potato for a lot of people, like,
sell down.
I think people are rightly pointing out that government and political entities are in many ways exempting themselves from this bill, whereas it was consciously, nonprofits were consciously included alongside businesses, would you say that? I mean, would you look at some additional protections for people from government data breaches, from political organizations?
Are political organizations exempt from the bill?
I don't think. So,
What, I tried to ask our lunch council, so I'll ask them again, but
they're not here.
my sense is their opinion was yes, because the nonprofit world was intentionally written into the bill. Otherwise, this would just apply to businesses. So if that's
I
incorrect,
think it applies to people who have data and then there's exemptions. So it's not entities this is who it applies to. I think it's everyone who has data and then there's exemptions.
okay, yeah, so they could call any of us or Apple Blue or something and delete
Yeah, I
your
would look
data.
at the exemptions. Yeah.
But you were gonna talk about the sale of data.
So
Okay, and then I have a question.
So anyway,
after you
getting
finish
back
that,
to
because I
this
wanna
this
ask.
concept of why it's important to act is, when 4 years ago, when we first proposed a more sweeping, not more sweeping than this, but at the time, a more sweeping comprehensive data privacy act. A lot has happened since then, and a lot more states are getting on board. We used to be the leader. I mean, we were the first state in the nation to create a data broker registry, was groundbreaking at the
It
time.
was.
And then California followed and all the other states are kind of following. But now there's new technology on the horizon that needs our attention and we still haven't gotten to dealing with these more comprehensive biometric stuff, data minimization, all these elements. So I'm eager for us to kind of find what is the right balance on these issues, codify them, and then move on to the next technology, which is going to be having such an impact on consumers, which is AI in my mind. So, so that's why it's important. I know there's been interest in this committee on what the harms are about a data breach, about data privacy. Would you like me to just know
I
a few
think
of them?
Yes,
particularly, yes, I talked to Chris about that this weekend.
Okay.
I know Wendy is.
So these are just brainstorms. One is physical safety. Geolocation is important. We have protection, I'm gonna give you an example. We have protections in Vermont for survivors of domestic violence and their addresses at the Secretary of State's office. So if someone's physical location with data, and that is about physical safety. Financial harm, we talk about this all the time. Identity theft, that comes from having your data. Scams is a way to get your data so that they can steal your identity. Discrimination harms, a classic example of this is biometric data being used in a way that's harmful because the algorithm is not, I don't even know how to, it's such a big problem, I don't know how to put it in a sentence. The algorithm was not made, it was made for white men, and so women and people of color are impacted negatively, and an example of that is a facial recognition software was used to identify a person, a suspect, and then the wrong man was arrested who had never done anything and held for a week based on improper use of biometric data. Reputational harms, non-consensual deepfake pornography is an example of that, using biometric data that way. Psychological harms, an example we give is social media uses your data and your history to create an algorithm that feeds you certain things you're going to click on so that they can show ads. And the example that I like to use is if you are someone who has an eating disorder and maybe find yourself always lingering, clicking or looking on content that is actually harmful to you, but that data that you keep looking at is the kind of data that's going to keep you on the algorithm, keep you on the app, and that's what's needed. And so the data is used in a way that creates psychological harm for you. Just giving examples.
Yeah.
And then dark patterns is a concept that is more new to me than some of these other issues, but that is a harm to your autonomy where you're being manipulated to click certain things and whatnot. So that's an autonomy harm. Sure, we could spend probably all our.
And those
but
are all
just take
part
me
of the
through.
reason that we prohibited the sale of children's data
Mhm.
in the kids code, which this doesn't have the same prohibition.
Mhm.
So we'd probably want to add that here.
Yeah, those two bills they're like overlap.
Right.
We're
So-
hoping
But
that,
that's
Yeah.
in our minds, the stronger protections for children were important. You know, so that they're not limited at all.
I love that.
Are you familiar with what's going on with the federal privacy bill? I understand between the Senate and House committees have agreed on.
Yeah.
Substance.
I remember Senator being very surprised last spring when there was activity, and then I realized that I'm just very cynical about the Congress being functional. You guys are, I'm used to you guys and I don't. So anyway, I don't know what the status is and I remain cynical, but we're very lucky we have a champion and Senator Welch is really interested in data privacy.
Yeah.
Are you
So
familiar with what's in the bill and whether or not it mirrors or contains the same kinds of things that we're talking about here?
it does. I will say that, you know, one of the things that happens is when the states are acting and then the federal government and every state wants their version. It's like, well, we worked this out and it took us years and ours is the best. And so I always say, you know, I really like California as a leader in data privacy. I think they've done a really good job in a lot of areas. So it's like, I don't want a federal law that's not going to be as protective as California's or Vermont's if we pass this. So I know you have a lot of people probably still to hear from, so I don't want to linger. Let me just make sure that I ticked on a few other.
And I just have a quick question.
Oh, sure. I don't need to belabor all the points that we've made. I just wanted to touch on the portions of the bill that relate to our office. So
Yeah, the education piece is a
That's
big
one of
question
them.
mark. Yeah.
oh, that's fine. We do that anyway. And if you put it in statute that you have more specificity about what you want that to look like, that's fine with us.
Well, ACCD has sort of said they don't have the capacity to do
Okay.
this. Who would have the capacity in your office?
We do this with a lot of bills where, you know, a bill gets passed and we'll write a guidance. When the data broker registry passed, we wrote a guidance and we kind of helped people and we'll do, you know, social media and try to be helpful to people and put stuff on our website. We also do outreach and education through the consumer assistance program. I don't know if the ACC doesn't have a branch like that, like a more constituent oriented branch, but CAP goes out all the time with small business advocate, full-time position. So we're kind of it's literally located at University of Vermont. So we are in the education business, so maybe it's a little easier for us. So I'm not bothered by that portion. That sounds good to me.
We do still have a lot of people asking us to take a look at that section and have other partners at the table who provide technical assistance to small businesses.
That's a good idea.
So that might end up being a separate piece. How long do you see as being a fair timeline for businesses to become educated about the new requirements?
I mean, we usually, I don't know if this is official, but I would say we usually give a year kind of grace period. The law will go into effect. We obviously want to do what the legislature wants us to do. So, you know, we try to be reasonable. But I would say the first year we focus on education when a new law goes into place. And sometimes I remember with the data broker registry, there were businesses who just were like, we're not sure if we're a data broker, or we don't think we are,
Right.
don't think we are. So we also are in conversation.
I think that's gonna be a conversation for many businesses on controller process. I mean, I think they're gonna
Yeah.
have to figure that out.
So we'll be there to support them in sorting that out.
I'm trying to figure out order.
No, Allison was first, or
I do that, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I just, we had a very productive conversation with Oliver the other day, and Nicole, I'm sure, and Jeannie will speak to this, but already.
This is your husband, we're good enough.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think we should.
Who brought us
Who's Oliver,
blockchain,
you know?
who brought us blockchain, and who brought us stuff and he brought us a lot of new technology, stuff that we've worked on. And he is, it's clear that the private sector is already helping solve this problem for many companies, and that they, through particularly, that they outsource a lot of their data management. Did you look at what SOC and ISO do now? And if a company, would that be a threshold for exemption if companies already responsibly outsource their data management to some of these companies that are both trusted and well respected and paid to do this job of managing privacy and data?
No.
Okay, so you haven't looked at ISO or SOC to see how, okay.
And we can talk, I'd like to talk more
Yeah.
about that, but,
And Jeannie and Nicole, I think, are gonna be able to chat about that.
Okay.
so
Let's get to
just
that.
in regard to your office, if there is not a private right of action, what would be an effective amount of staff to, enforce?
You know, so obviously we currently enforce the Consumer Protection Act. There are many more violations of the Consumer Protection Act than we could possibly enforce. Every attorney general will tell you that. So it's just a matter of, you know, juggling what's the priority. And that to me is, you know, egregiousness, number of Vermonters impacted, those kinds of, maybe sometimes we focus on with the Consumer Protection Act, vulnerable people. So we, you know, we prioritize and focus. In other words, we don't need additional people to enforce this. It's just a matter of degrees.
Okay, you just wouldn't be able to enforce everything.
Yeah,
So-
which is this way it is now with the Consumer Protection Act.
Okay, because Connecticut has a whole division.
Yeah, well, Connecticut also doesn't have, every office, they don't do criminal work in the Attorney General's office in Connecticut. They're really focused on consumer work. So we have both, and we do have more people in consumer than we do in criminal, but we do a wide variety of things. So just touching on or continue to look through my list of how our office is involved. The data protection assessments, that hasn't come up. I just wanted to flag for you that I think they're okay, but the Consumer Protection Act, which obviously this law is connected to and in Title IX, already has a process for us to get data from businesses. This is nice because it's very specific to them. It tells them what to do and then we can kind of get it. But there already is a process through the civil investigative demand.
Okay.
So just wanted to flag that for you. But
Meaning you,
okay.
you think there's still enough for your office to use to enforce if we take this piece out?
I don't know if that's a part of the conversation or.
I'm hoping we're not gonna take it out, but to create a threshold that is manageable for the first iteration of this kind of
Right.
policy. I'm not interested in taking it out.
Well,
So
yeah.
put that down.
I don't think we
But I
should,
am
it just
interested, yeah.
overlaps with
Making it
that,
work
so
better.
just
I
wanted
mean,
to
the
flag it for you.
problem that we're hearing is, you heard a little bit of it yourself. There's other data assessments that many businesses are asked to comply with. And this would add another layer and add confusion. So I mean, we're hearing requests for a lot of exemptions if you fall under another data privacy regulation scheme.
Well,
And then it's like, who's left and
Is this-
what cost is that to small business?
is this the one they have in Connecticut? Is this the same?
They have
assessment?
no private right of action in Connecticut.
No, the data assessment,
Oh.
meaning this probably came from another.
Yes, and this
statute.
probably came from Connecticut because we modeled so much of this.
So it would probably
We
be
don't
the
know.
smallest
Fine.
businesses and they're not impacted because or is that just a private right of action, right? So yeah, we can sort it out, but I just wanted to flag for you, when you're looking at that, think of it layered onto our current authority. that we
And
currently
you
have.
don't need it.
I mean, it's nice, but I just, more than anything, I wanted to just flag for you that we already have this process.
Okay,
The CID, Civil Investigative Demand Process, which is in Title IX.
okay.
Regarding the cure period. There is section 2427B lays out a lot of, I mean, really what it's doing is it's dictating what our prosecutorial discretion is that we already have, so it's not really necessary, it's just narrowing what our focus would be, so. The beauty with the Consumer Protection Act is it's been around since like 1967 or something, so it's very well established. This would be creating kind of a new way for us to be applying things. So if it were me, I might consider deleting this because it's well settled law as it is, and I don't know that it's necessary. But I don't know how to. No, the section, sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about the cure.
Yeah.
2427, no, definitely not that. 2427B, it's sort of, find it.
We don't have the new bill in front of us yet. It's in editing.
Oh, I don't either.
Well,
The
it's
one
being
that,
printed.
the one that I got the one that came over from the house from the website.
It's probably, right, it's probably still the same section, so, but we don't have a bill in front of us at the moment.
So this is 2427 is enforcement, right of action and attorney general powers. So it lays out like, okay, the attorney general,
It's all the caveats about when you,
it
Go
says,
after
yeah, in
somebody.
determining whether to grant someone,
Yeah.
the opportunity to cure, here's the things you can consider.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, that's fine if you wanna leave that in, but right now we don't have a lot of detail on that. And sometimes when you're narrow like that, you might miss something.
I would, I think it's a
if you
good
wanna
flag
leave
in
it-
that if we change the private right of action, in general, we don't really need to be explicit.
Well, this relates
To
specifically,
your,
yeah, me,
the
not the,
capacity.
right, not the
Right.
private action, but I'm just flagging it for you as something
Yeah.
that's a little unusual.
Yeah.
In context of the CPA, but
Mhm.
not a big deal, wanna leave it in, just wanted to flag it for you. And then the last thing is there's a report on how things are going, due December 15th, 2026, and that sounds good to me.
Okay.
So those are all the things, I mean, this feels very long, so
She doesn't say cut out anything that isn't necessary.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean it's bad.
that's true.
But you want people
it's
to be
true.
able to read it and understand.
Yes.
Absolutely, and that is what, the AG's office has just said, this is what they do, they help educate, and I think combined with our small business community and our regional development corps, we are gonna be able to educate our public on whatever we end up as.
I wonder if also in Vermont, you know, when we take things from other states, it's good for industry, it's good for creating expectations. It's like, okay, they do this in this state and that state, and now it's, but I wonder if maybe I'm being snobby, our bill making is a little neater and tidier, and so we're not used to these very long bills, but it's still a good thing to have a language that's familiar to other businesses in other states. So there's that to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have four more witnesses before we get to bill drafting, so I will be asking people to stick to that 3-ish minutes and then a question. Matt Schwartz from Consumer Reports.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to testify today, and thank you for all of your work related to the strong privacy protections in Vermont. My name is Matt Schwartz, and I'm a policy analyst at Consumer Reports based in Washington, D.C. We're here today in support of the legislation as passed by the House. As written, the bill includes several protections that will ensure Vermont consumers' privacy is protected by default. To give some background, Consumer Reports has been heavily involved in advocating for strong state privacy legislation for the past few years. And in general, we've tried to persuade legislators to go further than what's passed in states like Virginia and Connecticut. Just recently, the Maryland legislature approved legislation that uses a data minimization standard very similar to the one proposed in this legislation. In addition to simply banning certain harmful data practices outright, such as the sale of sensitive data in Illinois, Massachusetts, and the recently announced by federal privacy.
Matt, maybe slow down your speaking because it's starting to cut out for us. And can I ask, did Maryland, that's in law now? The governor signed it and it's a law? No.
Governor, it's
Okay.
not, it's been approved by the legislature.
Okay.
So,
And let me try and move rooms so I can get a stronger Wi-Fi connection.
yeah, thanks, because you're cutting in and out.
It's a very frugal organization.
That's true, but they also. So,
Okay, hopefully it will be better in this room. Is
That
my
is better.
Yes, I don't need the video, I don't think. So if you want to leave the video off, we do it just 2 minutes.
Okay, so hopefully my connection is coming through stronger here. So I was just saying, in Maine, Illinois, Massachusetts, and the recently announced bipartisan federal privacy proposal, all adopt a kind of similar framework to what's being considered here. And we do think those are the types of guardrails that a privacy law should strive for. So honing in on the data minimization standard in H121 version 9.1, this has been pulled from the CCPA rules and states that consumers' information should only be collected and processed when reasonably necessary and proportionate to provide the services requested by the consumer. So if you think about the weather app on your phone, it makes sense that the app would collect your geolocation information in order to provide you with the local weather, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for that app to then share your geolocation information with Facebook, for example. And so H121 would simply say that that type of sharing should not occur by default. And then moving on to the data broker piece of the legislation, the major thing I'd like to hit on there is the universal opt-out mechanisms. That's section 2448 of the bill. It's a similar provision to recently passed law in California and language from section 12 of the recently announced federal proposal I mentioned earlier. This is crucial because it would give consumers more control over how their information is treated by these entities, which most consumers don't even know exist, let alone that they can amass thousands of data points about their lives that they never consented to sharing in the first place. And then last, I'd like to hit on the PRA. Again, for us, this is a key part of ensuring that a privacy bill is actually worth its salt and that consumers have recourse to protect themselves when there's been a violation and the AG is unable to take it up. I'll point out that the recently announced federal bill also has a private right of action that has a somewhat similar cure mechanism to the one that's being proposed in this legislation.
Censor bill that Randy and I heard about.
Right.
That they're working on, that they're picking up again. It has a private right of action.
Well, I mean, anything can change.
Of course, but I mean, that's, yeah.
Right, okay, you're saying that that's a key part?
Yes, yeah, and it sounds like there's going to be changes to the PRA in this bill on the Senate side, so I'm looking forward to looking at that. And I would just urge the committee to ensure that to the extent the PRA is being limited to certain types of entities, that at least the biggest tech companies where the most severe privacy invasions are happening are still covered. I think a company like Amazon, where a majority of their revenue doesn't necessarily come from buying or selling data, and yet their activities do carry massive risks for consumers, I would want to make sure that that type of business is still covered. And so maybe the 50% or more coming from sale or sharing, and then also a revenue threshold for gigantic businesses, something like that. That's just off the top of my head, reacting to what I heard today.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
So I'll wrap it up there. I can follow up with written comments for the committee, and
Great.
thanks again for having me testify.
That would be great.
Please do
Okay.
send written comments.
Yeah, send your
Thank you
stuff
so much.
to Magali.
John Potter.
Very good.
Oh, okay. Connected Commerce Council. I've not heard of this before.
Are you here in Vermont?
I am.
Well, we're delighted to have you today, but you were based where?
I'm based
Ah,
in Washington. Some of us think.
Congratulations on escaping.
okay.
Thank you.
Right, but
Wow.
good potential bill.
It's a lovely, I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, good. Thrilled you could come in. Last week you couldn't have flown in because we had so much snow.
And the problem is today's flying out.
Oh.
Because the B&Bs must have, and the hotels must have required everybody stay 2 or 3 nights.
Yes.
But we
I
did.
know.
yeah.
And literally, I'm driving to Manchester to get a connecting flight home.
Right.
That's so interesting. That is not surprising.
Um,
Well, they could have the flights on. Isn't that today?
Okay, well, as far as you've come, we still have very limited time, so.
I appreciate that, and I want to also be responsive to some of the testimony
Yeah,
of other folks, because I've been listening carefully. First of all, thank you for having me. The Connected Commerce Council has been around for about 6 years. We work with hundreds of small businesses over the years, talking about the opportunities and the risks of the transition to e-commerce and digital marketing, things like that. I'm going to be really honest with you. We are supported by Amazon and Google,
Okay.
but I'm not here to advocate on this. I'm here to really give you precise specifics about where the bill internally has conflicts. And
Okay.
where those conflicts, what is being called data minimization and what the Attorney General referred to as data collection minimization, right? Social security numbers. It's really a data processing minimization and how that conflicts with the very balanced and reasonable target advertising regulations.
Do you have a sense of any members from Vermont that are part of your council?
I don't, but
Okay,
we're not really a membership organization.
Okay,
So
okay.
it's just not that type of organization.
Okay.
But the real
problems with the bill is that it gives with one hand
Mhm.
and it takes away with the other. So the targeted advertising rules are actually very good.
Mhm.
They say these are the things you're not allowed to do.
Mhm.
What that implies, of course, is that these are the things you are allowed to do.
Mhm.
But then the data minimization provision says, well, we're not going to let you have or process the data to do those things that we've allowed you to do.
Okay.
You can't, I know you don't want to give with one hand and take away with the other. So literally,
We now have, well, we have a new version.
I know you
now,
do,
So
I
we
know
can
you do,
say
and I was
section.
scanning through as fast as I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
while I sat there, because I just got it.
Sure.
But I wasn't able to, but let me, if I can give you the framework here.
Mhm.
So the data processing prohibitions and permissions that are associated with targeted advertising are superseded by section 2419A2.
Mhm.
And 2419A2 says that you're only allowed to process data that's necessary, and you heard this from Matt Schwartz from Consumer Reports, that's necessary to provide the specifically requested product or service.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? That means that if I go to McNeil and Reed down in Rutland, third generation men's clothing store,
Good that you know that.
I do my homework, man. I do my homework. And I go there and I buy a holiday focused, holiday designed bow tie. Let's just say I do it for Christmas or Hanukkah. You take your pick. Or Kwanzaa. I'll go anywhere.
Yeah.
Holiday focused.
Holiday bow tie.
Valentine's.
And then 3 years later, if I did this in the 80s, they would know me. They wouldn't have to ask for my information. They would know me. And they'd say, oh, this guy likes holiday focused bow ties. The salesperson, I'm going to send him a postcard because we just got a new shipment in. Or we just got a new shipment of holiday focused shirts. Now, that data wasn't necessary to deliver the bow tie to me. But it wasn't offensive. It wasn't a misuse. It wasn't an abuse. They went out and found my data. They found my address. They probably found it in the yellow book, or the white pages, right? We all remember those. We remember those. The point is, if today I purchased the bow ties online, and even if I looked at every single holiday focused pair of socks, they wouldn't be permitted to email me about the new shipment. They wouldn't be permitted to advertise to me about the new shipment.
Because of the data minimization.
Because
section.
the data processing minimization rules restrict them, because they can only process data that's necessary to deliver to me the very specific thing that I've asked for, which is a bow tie. So they can use my data to ship it to me,
Right.
but they can't use my bow tie, data to tell me about the new ones.
Right.
And so the hotel gentleman who's
Yeah, that's
here,
what we're hearing from.
right? He
Sure,
can say, hey, you booked a room,
Yeah.
but then he can't tell you about his restaurant.
Right.
And that's just nuts. I mean, with all due respect, that's not what we want. So here's what we're asking for. We're asking for a very specific
Mhm.
tweak in the
Okay.
data processing minimization rule that actually is in the Attorney General's favorite bill, California,
Okay.
which talks about to achieve the specific purpose for which the consumer has been disclosed what we're doing with the data, not just to deliver the specific service
Mhm.
related to the collection of the data.
Mhm.
So you'll send that language.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And John is here, so I was worried you'd left because you weren't here anymore, so there you are.
I'm here.
Missing out.
So, and I'm happy to say for his, if that's helpful. For the data protection assessments, this is like, hello, we're creating this. new
Yeah, I
thing.
didn't think that.
Go
they
call a
said that.
lawyer, go call an accountant, go call McKinsey, and start throwing the money, because they don't know what this is either, and
Yeah.
they're inventing it as they go on.
Yeah.
Our suggestion, put this on Google, put this on Amazon, put this on big companies first.
Yeah.
Let's come back in 5 years,
Right.
because it sounds like the Attorney General really doesn't think they're terribly important.
Who's important?
The data protection assessments.
Oh, I know.
So
Yeah, that was
why
news
are we
to
putting
me.
them on
I don't know what it
anybody?
is.
But if we're gonna put them on
Yeah.
somebody, put them on somebody who's already doing them in other states.
Right.
And let them deal with it.
And we actually took our data assessment out of the kids code at the request of a similar group of people, so I don't know why they want this up.
Do you know, are there standards for data assessment? Is
It's a
it,
brand new thing.
so it's not defined anywhere?
Anywhere.
Well, it will be
Well,
at some point. But
it's
we
def-
don't need to,
It's
Come up with
defined,
okay.
but it
It's
is not.
defined here.
But it's not, but if you say to a lawyer, hey, can you whip me up a data protection assessment or an IT expert? You can say, what are you talking about? Oh, sure, I can do that. Hold on, let me get my billable hour strokes in here. Right?
Right.
Because we're gonna have to create this. Let the big guys create it. Let's figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze. Let's figure out if it's worth the money, if anybody cares, and then figure out if it should apply to companies that are, you know, the Vermont Hotel, or King Arthur, right? So that can be tomorrow's problem. I don't think anybody's waiting and wait. Honest to goodness, on the private right of action, I'm the one who's taking the phone calls from the small businesses beaten up by the patent trolls. And I'm the one that's taking the phone calls from the companies that are being beaten up by the ADA website compliance trolls. Where literally it's a business. People make a business. I'm a lawyer, not that kind of lawyer, but there's a business model that says you sue and you settle. It never gets to court. The Attorney General is correct. If it gets to court, Rule 11, you know, they can sanction the lawyers, the plaintiff's lawyers for not doing their homework. You see that happening in some high prominent cases today. But it's a sue and settle business model. And we're going to settle because it's going to be $5,000, $10,000 less than the cost to even hire the lawyer, make us go away. That's the business model.
Vermont Country Store was over $100,000 by the
Right.
time they
And
dealt
that's
with the
the key word.
$2,500 sale of liquor.
So again, private right of action, and I know you're changing it. I know there's going to be a harm standard. I know you're talking about limiting data brokers. I'm good with that. So, the small business exemption generally, I believe the federal law, the federal bill, because it's only a bill, it's also law.
Correct.
Right, is 200,000 data points. So, and I believe there's a dollar amount also. I believe there's dollar amount, but I haven't.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at with, Charity asking, what's the threshold of harm for a private right of action?
Well, the threshold,
For a person, for an individual person.
so there's a threshold of harm that's been committed. The other question is, what's the threshold of the business
Well,
that's really
well,
a small business, right? Let's talk about small businesses generally,
But,
right?
but as we have discussed with the kids code, the harm is not necessarily just financial. The harm
Agreed.
can be emotional, the harm can be life, the harm can be, there are a lot of.
100%.
But
Yeah, election, we haven't-
back pain is very
Lots of
hard
election.
to assess of an emotional harm.
Yeah.
That's,
I agree.
Yeah, and not just lots of, I mean, we haven't really talked about elections, but democracy is
At stake.
harmed.
We'll
by
talk about
the-
that next year with deep fakes.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
After the fact,
Right.
No, sadly, we may,
I mean, that's a big harm.
I was with a small business, a 3-person business in Albany 3 weeks ago with the chair who's writing that bill.
yeah,
3-person, Brooklyn-based, guys gotta make their heart sing right, Afghanistan vet, whatever, he's got all the right, hits all the right notes. 3-person business gets 25,000 web hits a month. So now you're saying that he's gonna have to do all this work, he's not a small business, because he gets 200,000, 300,000 web hits a year, all of a sudden, he's not a small business? Right, we need to have a
digital
standard view of
businesses
what's
like
a
that.
small business.
yeah.
And I'm not saying adopt the SBA formula with 500 employees and how many tens of millions. But what's a small business? And why should a small business, for the purposes of this, be different than small businesses for the purpose of what's a small business grant from the Department of Economic Development? So I know I'm talking really fast. And you only gave me 3 minutes and I took way too many.
no,
Okay.
thank you.
Have you made most of your points?
I did.
Okay, well,
Can I ask a question? And that is about the notification to consumers. Any suggestions or thoughts about how to notify consumers without giving a 500-page disclaimer?
Oh, in terms of your privacy policy.
Yeah.
It's really. Trying to remember what state I was in and they had on the books a standard law about plain English. Right?
Oh, yeah, we have that in our data broker bill.
We just don't follow it.
It's very
No, but we
hard.
have,
So the tension, of course, is the
Right.
lawyers
Right.
who want to put in, and again, I'm a lawyer, I don't blame them, right? The lawyers are saying, no, we have to put in every single little minutia, right? So, and as a result of that, it's impossible to read or it's endless. So here's on the data minimization issue, right? The proponents of this, every single use of data needs to be specifically disclosed, conflict with your, how do we make this short and easy to understand?
Right.
It also creates what we have in Europe, which is, I don't know, the last time folks have browsed European websites, there's 20 or 30 permissions in there.
Right.
And so the consumer does one of two things. They opt into everything or they opt out of everything, but they don't read them. And so the point is, the more we try to be precise, the more we get to longer permissions and longer disclosures, and it's painful, and consumers just ignore it all. They just ignore it all. And the challenge is next week. If you say to them, do not sell, and the word sell means sell, they understand it. If the word sell means share with my affiliate,
Right.
think Old Navy and the Gap,
Yeah.
right? The other thing about data sharing, by the way, is lots and lots and lots of these businesses that are online and offline businesses, small businesses, have 3 LLCs. They run their Amazon selling through one LLC.
Right.
They do their own Shopify website, which is their branded website, through their own LLC, and they run the brick and mortar store through a third LLC because it's for insurance reasons, tax reasons. And now you're data sharing, and I think you all are good because you have the affiliate language in, but some states don't.
Right, I think we've
Yeah.
taken care of that umbrella.
We
of-
took out the
of-
commingling data
Right.
piece, and I mean, what you're saying that overall, I think, is what I keep thinking about with this bill is the smallest businesses are going to have the hardest time complying. And that's an equity issue, you know, that the smaller your business, that if you're an immigrant business, you're a aluminum business working out of your own warehouse, you know,
Yeah.
who are you going to? What are you
And
asking?
Nicole
for?
and Jeannie have
Yeah.
talked to about some of those.
Right, and
places.
if you're a made in Vermont business,
Mhm.
your market is, which is fabulous,
Which is great,
right?
yes.
But now you're taking a made in Vermont maple syrup or wood carvings business and telling them that they're at a disadvantage against the made in Maine business
Mhm.
or the made in New Hampshire business because their data requirements
Right.
are stricter,
Right,
even with regards to non-Vermont citizens.
yes,
That's
the problem.
yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Dawn.
Thank you. So you're sending us some.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
the language. We really
Right.
appreciate
And
that.
thank you for making the
Thank
trip
you.
Thank
and
you.
for your journey home.
Nicole and Jean, are you here together? Is that?
Well, Nicole, I think is starting. framing it.
Yes, we
Okay.
are here together. We're happy to talk to you together. And unfortunately, I have a live presentation that I am supposed to start at 11:30 for Startup Rutland, educating businesses,
That's
as
the
it
time
turns
that
out.
we have also, so
Awesome.
we will.
We got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I will keep my comments concise, and I'm going to pass over to Professor Ikes as well, because she really is our on-team data privacy expert. I am the director of the Vermont Small Business Law Center and Clinic at Vermont Law and Graduate School. Our job is to educate small businesses about the law, about how to comply with the law, about what they should be aware of, and a lot of the questions that we answer are about how to hire and work with a lawyer, believe it or not. We have been doing this for about 6 years. Professor Ikes started the program back in 2018. Through Community Navigator, we were able to add a referral service so that we can get small businesses to a lawyer, help them get those services that they need. We pay for up to 10 hours of services that they receive. We've learned a few things through the work that we've done. We've done hundreds and hundreds of educational consults in group and individual settings. We've learned that there's a strong need in this state for legal education on the most fundamental legal requirements and options for small businesses. We've learned that business owners cannot afford to pay attorneys. They can't afford to pay them to educate them, and they can't afford to pay them to comply with the law for the most part. They generally have a deep fear of the unknowns that they are facing. As I believe some of your witnesses have testified to, there's a lot of information out there. It's very complicated, and for an individual small business owner to navigate that, it's extremely difficult without a solid source of information. They're afraid of what they might be missing despite their best efforts. When it comes to data privacy requirements, they're especially afraid of what could happen if they don't do it right, or if something happens outside of their control, or it's off their radar, it's new to them, or it's simply a source of great stress that they don't know how to deal with.
Can I pause you there?
Yes.
The bill now that ACCD does not feel they can participate, only has the AG as information. Do you see that as a concern for some of these businesses?
I think that education is going to prevent enforcement, but I think that having the enforcer be the educator is not going to be extremely effective. That's my personal opinion. I believe that this might need to be I mean, we're positioned to be able to help with education ourselves, and we can do so through the work that we do. But I don't know that having the enforcer step in to explain what's going to happen or what a business needs to do is going to be as effective as having it from the outside.
Right.
So just on that point, because I think we all recognize it's going to require a lot of education. Resources for you guys to do that, you're going to need some additional resources, yes?
Oh, that would be very nice. It is something that we can certainly incorporate into our work now. We provide education, and to be able to get folks to an attorney to really do a data privacy assessment, that would be something that would require quite a bit of education, and they would need a lot of support for that. We would be positioned, and we'd be happy to compete for the privilege of being able to do that work, yes. But it would take a little bit of extra funds to be able to add it to what we have already.
Right.
Just to our point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. Please
Oh, no,
continue.
you're fine. Just want to make sure that I can hit on the important points. Without education, without the ounce of prevention, compliance is really hard won through enforcement. We present on data privacy to a lot of different business owners, and the responses that we get when we explain it, basic breach processes and consequences are, sure, on one occasion, we have a data privacy policy, we've got cyber insurance, it's great, we're fine. That's one occasion. All of the other responses that we've seen have been, oh my goodness, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to comply? This is terrifying. They want to know if they have a safe harbor. What do I need to do to be safe? What kind of policy do we need? What does it need to say? What the heck is cyber insurance? How much is it going to cost me? If I have it, am I in compliance? Am I safe? We can't answer some of these questions because we give information. We don't give advice. But every business owner that we talk to soaks up that information, and they walk away more confident, more clearly able to understand what they need to do to be in compliance, and we hope they'd be more successful. So I really encourage the committee to consider the need for educating small business owners, whatever the outcome of this bill. And I'd like to pass it to my colleague, Jeanette Ikes, before I have to run.
Yeah.
Unless there's questions.
Questions for you?
Yes, I have a few minutes.
I can probably
So
address
I know
you, Nicole. You've got 2 minutes to get to Rutland.
Yeah, let's let Nicole go in. Nicole, thank you for all your work in the flood aftermath as well
Yeah.
for small businesses. So thank you very much.
And
Let's
they-
let Jean
Yes,
speak
I know,
in
but
that.
I just want to ask Nicole, if you could get us, what would make a threshold for safe harbor? Where could we be excluding businesses? What kind of safe harbor could we be exempting in this bill?
12,000.
No,
We have
it's not,
some new
it's
thresholds,
not just
et cetera,
the
but
number.
yeah.
It's also what could they be getting in the private sector that would enable them to do that? So that would be great if you could get that.
Sure, certainly,
Jean,
would be happy to do
you
that.
still do just
Thank
have a
you.
couple minutes, cause we're looking at a new draft of the bill.
Hi, Jeannie.
Hello, how is everyone today? Thank you for allowing us to speak to you. We appreciate the opportunity. I too am going to be quick in my comments. I have, much like Nicole, another obligation. So I wanted to touch on briefly given my background, I have both a background in computer science and in law. It makes me somewhat uniquely situated to talk to you about the complexities of complying with this law for small businesses. By and large, having educated a lot of students about technology over the years, I can tell you that they're confused and it's their area of expertise or their planned area of expertise. So these small businesses, I would add to Nicole's plea for the for the legal education, a technical education piece as well. There are complexities here that will be mind-numbing. So the law is a black box for these small businesses, and the tech is for many of them as well. The larger businesses, those that can take advantage of the services, whether it's ISO or SOC compliance, and can sort of feed into a safe harbor there, are not these small mom and pop shops that are selling maple syrup down the road. So what we're concerned about, and what certainly the Small Business Law Clinic is concerned about, is how to educate these small businesses and how to make sure that they are able to comply with the law.
Jean,
Yes.
on that, to me, it's not just a question of education funding. To me, it's also a question of where you find ambiguity in the language about how businesses are supposed to comply, please share that with us. Because the more ambiguity, the more someone with a high paid attorney can find their own loophole, and the more a small business without an attorney is lost in wondering about the unknown. So any ambiguity you see, please also flag that for us.
And
In
certainly I need the next version of the bill to do that.
Yes.
And so I'd be
It's now
happy.
on our website.
It's
Perfect.
on our website
Perfect.
now. John's about to walk us through it.
Perfect. And I will take a look at that, and I will send my comments back to the committee. The notion of a safe harbor is a good one. The other way to handle this is to make a privacy policy for small businesses, some type of standard, and to set out a standard that small businesses will comply with in a privacy policy that they adopt. And that could be handled as well. It would have to be something slightly tailored. But as you know, the FTC is doing enforcement actions even as we speak on businesses who put out privacy policies and do not comply with their privacy policies. So that's another interesting possibility as far as this is concerned, and in which direction to move into. I wanted to address a couple more pieces: opt-in and opt-out of advertising. I'm not sure exactly if John was hinting that the opt-out is better than the opt-in. I would say that there is a long and storied set of expectations for privacy that align more with opting in than opting out. And watching any type of advertising that makes folks opt out as part of the minimization and assessment process. And then thresholds of harm. I wonder what the thresholds of harm are, and whether or not, when we use loose terminology, we're scaring small businesses and making it a complex matter to comply with them. And
Probably.
question on that?
No,
we're just
agree.
agreeing.
I just need
to clarify.
Yeah, and any language you have, you're working with small businesses about what concrete guidance looks like for them. So we really welcome your suggestions and contributions. Senator Harris.
Just to be clear, the opt-in, you see that as better for the consumer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, by far, opt-in is better for the consumer.
Want to make sure, okay.
Opt-out.
Agree.
Opt-out is the California standard for the CCPA. So that's that piece. For the AG's office to be put in charge, as far as the private right of action is concerned, it seems to me that not having some type of private right of action creates a burden potentially on an already overburdened AG's office if we want to see this law enforced in some way. So having a private right of action would relieve that. On the other hand, it shouldn't be a Band-Aid for an overburdened AG's office. Right. So that's a balance.
Yeah.
Right.
And my final addition here before I leave is a plea again to educate small businesses and to have some kind of standard. Putting all of the rules and promulgating the rules in the hands of the AG, I don't know if that's helpful or harmful or a lot of power in one place. And I don't know how that will impact small businesses. And I would point that out as well.
Sorry, which one? Say that one again.
In one section, and I could have read the wrong version because I did read it 2 nights ago. You put promulgating rules about the specifics in the hands of the AG's office. And when you put that in the hands of the AG, you're putting a lot of power and a lot of potential impact on small business in the hands of the AG's office. And I wonder that shouldn't go to some type of committee.
Okay. We did have other suggestions for like a ongoing committee when
Yeah.
we're lots of reasons.
I'm not
Okay.
surprised.
Thank
I'm not surprised by that. And then my
Right.
final thing is you laughingly mentioned deepfakes. I would point you to an organization in California that is moving some really interesting and fascinating legislation through the California state legislature at the moment. It's called Cited. And they are operating on the notion that this next election could be moved by deepfakes. And they have proposed legislation on that. So if you're aware of the group Cited, CITED, I would
There's
propose
lots of options.
you look to
So-
their potential legislation that they're putting through, their proposed
Right,
legislation.
that's very helpful.
Thank you so much, Jean. Thanks for all your work as well. And we should move on to the new draft of the bill.
Thank you so
Good to
much
see you.
for the opportunity
And
to
we
speak
hope to
with
be in
you.
touch. That wasn't clear.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And she says she's available for you,
Mm-hmm.
as is Nicole.
Great. Hi, John. Thanks for your patience. You're hearing a lot of what we're hearing, and we do have the specific suggestions coming in already for language changes, some of which you've seen and haven't. But the latest bill, which I know this is gonna go through at least one more iteration, has the highlighted area.
Yes,
Okay.
Okay, okay. Go for the gossip.
I will, good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
John Gray. Obviously, like the council, I'll try to be efficient, just give it limited times. I'll have a short snippet of a response to the interaction of data minimization plus targeted advertising when we get to that piece, but I will say the testimony we heard is helpful for understanding what language specifically, which is not actually the reasonably proportionate piece, but the services piece, where the limit is seen to be. But I will call it out when we get there. I just wanted to note that.
Thank you, John.
Cool. Shall we jump in or do we need to?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, Keisha knows it.
Yep. So I'm just gonna scroll to instances where we have highlight and I'll call out what has happened in these pieces. At 4A, we're talking about.
So what page you on? Because
We are
now
on
have the top.
page 2.
Okay.
And I can make this bigger on the screen if it's
Go
helpful, but
for
I know
it.
you guys
Such as-
have to track.
Yeah. Got it.
So page 2, line 7, this is the definition of biometric data. What you're gonna see here is changes that really go down to the top of the next page. All the changes you see on page 2 are flow through from what's at the top of page 3.
Yeah.
It's to call it that as used by law enforcement for purposes of an active investigation or prosecution, personal data under subdivision, and I'll scroll up to these, does not constitute biometric data. So that's your depictions, images, descriptions, or recordings, and data derived from those depictions, images, descriptions, or recordings. I did want to say, I don't really think that this change is necessary because we already have a construction of statute that says law enforcement may proceed with normal obligations, but this was a specific request to say that for law enforcement purposes, the depictions, images, descriptions, recordings with that derived data from that would not be considered biometric data. I consider it superfluous, but that was the request. We'll jump down to
Page 7. A, 26.
yes, heightened risk of harm to minor. So just to call out what this is what triggers reasonable care to avoid online products, services, or features that present this heightened risk of harm to a minor. And it also triggers certain things related to data protection assessments for those online services, products, or features for minors. The changes that you see here are to move from the existing concept that we had, which tracked sort of old torts language related to privacy torts, to update to match the concept that's seen in the S289, which you guys passed out. So we're deeming heightened risk of harm to a minor to be any of the following: the presence of reasonably foreseeable risk of material, physical, or financial injury to a minor. That's not substantially different to one of the concepts that was in the pre-existing draft, the prior draft. Emotional distress, that is different than what was in the prior draft. A highly offensive intrusion on the reasonable privacy expectations of a minor. This is a more heightened requirement than in the prior draft, which just required intrusion upon seclusion or privacy. Encouragement of excessive or compulsive use of an online service product or feature by a minor. This was something that's in the kids code bill. I will call out, this is in some ways not necessary here, because there is a separate provision in the minors protection section that says the controller shall not use design features to encourage extended use of these pieces. So in some senses, this request as well is a bit superfluous and potentially created some confusion, but this was just tracking S289. And then adding in discrimination against the minor based upon minor's race, ethnicity, sex, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or national origin. That is not a concept that was necessarily picked up in the last draft, but we do have independent prohibitions on discrimination. But this was done to align, the request was to align with kids code pieces.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
Any issues so far?
There's no, nothing other than what I pointed out that you might have some superfluous. There is a change somewhat in substance, but much of this tracks some of the same concerns with different formulations. And like I said, that highly offensive intrusion is a higher standard for.
Next is 16, page 16.
14.
Actually, we're on 12.
Oh.
So on page 12, line 8.
Exchange.
Sale of personal data. So previously, this was a lengthy list that called out a set of terms that I will just say theoretically are all captured in the word exchange. So in some sense, this is a simplification of what was there. However, there was a piece that is meaningfully different in the last piece, and this was why this particular change was requested. The previous draft called out specifically that other forms of communication, including orally or by writing or electronic means, would be deemed sale of personal data. This change simplifies to just be exchange of consumers' personal data by a controller to a third party for that monetary or other valuable consideration, otherwise for commercial purpose. What I will say is, while this tracks more closely Connecticut's language, this does not definitively exclude oral communications that affect a sale. In fact, essentially that fits into this bucket. So again, I'm not sure if this accomplishes the advantage of the lengthier verbiage in the previous draft was that it made clear that oral communication would constitute sale of personal data. It is now less clear whether that will be the case. And so if we wanted definitively, if the idea is to prohibit exchange of information orally constituting sale of personal data, we would need to actually call that out specifically.
Right.
What's an example of?
Well, remember before we had the long list.
Right, but what's an example of oral communication that is a sale of data?
I don't know in the data context when this happens, like do folks walk in, but it could be that you sign up for a program and people say, I want to have this information from you, say, I agree to give you this information. If you'll include me, like I'll get some benefit from this. I mean, I don't know how common that.
Conversation.
Well, but just think of ordering from a catalog. Often, I mean, for some of us, we still call LLB and give them a bunch of stuff. That's an oral exchange.
Yep.
Every time you give information, almost anywhere in in-person retail, it could be a whole range of things.
Right.
Not just retail.
Right. So the oral is in the
Oral is in the
getting the data, not exchanging the data.
The oral affects the oral communication affects the exchange of that data for valuable consideration.
So what you're saying is this simplifies it, but may not be as explicit or not as inclusive.
Exactly. It is now a question whether or not that would, I would say if someone went through the legislative history and saw that you elected to move deliberately from a concept that contemplated oral communication to one that does not, they could read into that it was not there. But this could be clearer if the specific intent is to exclude that oral communication. You might want to do that. I also do just want to be sensitive to time.
Okay. Yeah, but we have 15 minutes.
Jumping down to 14, this one's a pretty straightforward one. So we're talking about, this is page 14, line 4. This is the definition of sensitive data. You'll recall that consent is required for processing of sensitive data. And this calls out several categories of information for which that consent would then be required. What we've added here is to the subdivision E financial information piece, that tax returns would constitute that. This is really just clarifying, this is deeming that to be the case. It's not necessarily a substantive expansion, it's just calling out that that should be a kind of sensitive data.
And it's whatever kind of government, state, federal.
Yep, it doesn't tie to any particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jumping down to the applicability section, this is on page 16.
Yeah.
We're talking about section 2416. Some updates to the thresholds. We've moved from 6,500 consumers, irrespective of revenue generated, to 25,000. And then for our alternative threshold, which contemplates large sales of personal data, we jumped from 3,250 to 15,000 consumers and deriving more than 50%. That was previously 20%. So these are pretty substantial increases in the thresholds. There will be presumably, I don't know the empirics, but this should pick up significantly, potentially significantly fewer.
So, Sean, I'm a little concerned that that we're not, that the previous witness who identified that there are lots of big companies that we want to get that are not just selling data.
You're talking about Matt Schwartz, who called out Amazon may not derive.
Exactly.
Right. For the huge ones, they're likely to meet threshold 1, just to call that out. And they may not need to have that threshold, but it's an empirical question, so I can't really answer that.
And I guess the arbitrary numbers here are a little concerning to me, that they don't actually represent a percent of Vermont's population. And I would ask us to consider actually a percent of Vermont's population, like 5%, which is 32,500. I think it would be helpful to have it tied for the future as we go forward into a percent of the population.
And just to call out, the previous draft's numbers were based on percentages rather than just random figures. And those percentages were meant to be in line with the direction that the thresholds in other states were approaching. So it is true that the prior draft had lower thresholds than other states, but that is in part for response to the fact that Vermont's smaller, and the percentages were tracking what other states were doing. That putting to the side whether or not you reach a sufficiently low threshold to where it doesn't really matter what the size of the state is, a business is business. So question for you guys, but it's true. Percentage approach is what the previous draft had.
And I would call that. Any other comments here? Let's try.
We need to talk about this.
Yeah, that's a big discussion.
Yeah, I think you guys may have much bigger thoughts than we can probably do in 12 minutes on the whole bill, but
okay, just cruise by a bunch of changes.
Yeah, page 21. We're in the exemptions section. So the chapter does not apply to these particular entities. On line 14, there's a new entity level exemption proposed here, which is for public service companies subject to the rules and orders of the Vermont Public Utility Commission regarding data sharing and service quality. My understanding is that there's some independent regulation of these entities. I will just call out, and I can reach out to folks on this front. When I looked, I'm not familiar with how utilities work. The term that I was seeing more commonly in Vermont statute was public service commissions, or something to that effect. So that's something I can confirm, just if there's a.
We changed the name to the Public Utility Commission. So that's.
Yep. And this is the piece I can just confirm to make sure that if you guys do embrace this concept of an entity level exemption, that we do in fact have the right Vermont verbiage on this front. I do think the rules piece is here.
Okay.
Jumping now. Sorry. Consumer rights remain the same, but we jump down to page 24.
Oh.
We're talking about controllers' obligations in responding to consumer requests. Their exercise of their consumer rights under this section. A controller shall respond to the consumer without undue delay, but not later than 60 days after receipt of the request. This was previously, I believe, 15 days, so a pretty substantial uptick in the time afforded for responding to those requests. Jumping, I'm sorry, this is so scattered, it's just unfortunately the way that it, so data minimization, this is what we're coming to. This is page 28. We are in section 2419. And you'll see the highlight on line nothing. Again, that's page 28. So I will call out that the language change I was requested to make here, I don't think addresses the concern that animated the decision, based on the testimony that I heard earlier this morning. So what we have here is a change to see in 2A, this is your data minimization piece, process personal data only, and this previously said as reasonably necessary and proportionate to provide the services. That language has been struck, and it now says process personal data only to provide the services for which the personal data was collected. This does not achieve what I think the intent behind that change is, because now it's actually unclear what you would need to do if you're trying to.
This is not highlighted.
Just A is highlighted because it's deleted language. So you're going to see instances where I have highlighted language because I can't show deletion other than through like track changes.
Okay.
So what I would say here is if you're really trying to modify the data minimization piece in the way that I think you were trying to, I don't think you would cut that first section about reasonably necessary and proportionate to, you would change the services piece. That's actually the key point that I heard from the testimony this morning.
Is that 2419?
Yep, we're in 2419. However, I do just want to address the basic, one of the premises of that conversation there. Targeted advertising is not prohibited. The way that this would work is that, as you can see, a controller can process personal data for a number of different items, not just what's in bucket A. So they can do for that service for which personal data was collected, for another disclosed purpose compatible, or for some other purpose if they obtain the consumer's consent. And I think that you guys were effectively hinting at this when you were comparing opt-in versus opt-out for these purposes. I did just want to make that point clear, but to call back, if you wanted to do what I think you are trying to do based on this morning's testimony, I think you would change this to provide the services piece rather than the reasonably necessary and proportionate piece. And it sounds like you're going to get language requests on that front, but I just,
So you're just highlighting where we would see that.
Exactly. And there is a deletion here that occurred that was removing that reasonably necessary, but I don't think it achieves the.
We should put it back in.
Right. I think that's exactly what we were hearing is not provide the services for which the data was collected, but provide the services for which a reasonable expectation exists that there's a similar product or whatever.
It's going on sale.
Right,
I
right.
would like to get that.
Yes. Yeah.
So
this is the vote.
We get ads
This
through
is
the
the vote.
mail all
Yeah.
the time.
Right.
So does.
I know. And you've knocked out of them at any time anyway.
My concern is
Your
what,
house have returned to sender.
Oh, your actual physical mail?
Yeah, you get ads
Yeah.
in the mail.
Right. I was talking about like, I get emails now,
Oh.
no.
Yeah.
right, well, we all get books,
Right.
but my concern, John, is are you concerned that this change is inadequate and that we have over deleted?
So I actually think in the deletion you've made, you have not really achieved anyone's purposes.
So it's,
Okay.
so
But
that,
basically, you haven't eliminated the actual data minimization that is perceived to impose this opt-in constraint on targeted advertising.
okay,
But you also have made it unclear what people would need to do.
so then your recommendation is that we go back to the original language.
It is, if you're trying to eliminate the data minimization piece or change it, you could look to what other states have that don't include the services piece. That's what you could do.
Okay,
There's another change that flows through from the attempt to eliminate data or reduce the effect of the data minimization piece of this, which you'll see on page 29. Actually, before we get to that though,
so
yes, sir.
this is just a pin, we need to discuss this.
You will have to do something here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, 29.
Top of page 29. This is mechanisms to revoke consent and how quickly a controller be required to cease processing the data. I think so. Sorry, this is the one where we jumped from 15 to 60 days. This was not later than 15 days after receiving the request. We've jumped to 60 days. So a 45-day boost after that request to revoke consent, affording the company that additional time to cease processing data. The data minimization piece that I wanted to call out on page 29 is at V1. And again, because deletions don't show, I show these through highlighting just sections. So we previously had a subdivision 1 that said a controller shall not process, I'm just saying this off the top of my head, but shall not process in a way that is not reasonably proportionate and necessary to any purposes. And that picked up any of those 3 buckets that we just talked about above. That has been removed. So if you're talking about under A3 that we were just hinting at, a further disclosed purpose for which consumer's consent is required, the controller would no longer be bound to do what is reasonably necessary and proportionate under that purpose, essentially. So this is.
So you're recommending where this is an overreach?
I'm just calling out what the effect of it is. I can't say what you should do here. I'm just calling out that the controller now has more flexibility as to what they do with consented to purposes that they would not have had under the prior draft.
Okay, so we'll digest that, but we should look at all of it.
The other updates you see here are just to fix numbering based on that deletion.
Okay.
You're going to see highlighted like on page 30 at the top, knows that. This is every instance where we talked about actively knows or willfully disregards. There is one piece that I wanted to call out that could be a substantive change between these that you might want to be concerned about, which is if you look in Title IX elsewhere, we say things like knows or deliberately avoids knowing. We say something to that effect. And that might be a kind of concept that you're trying to get at here, because you could have controllers that deliberately refuse to confirm someone's age so that they don't get picked up by these restrictions. They don't know that the consumer is at least 13, therefore they can escape this prohibition. So if you had something like if the controller knows or matches what the Title IX language is, which is something like knows or deliberately avoids knowing, you might be in a safer position. I can just see a way that controllers can get around some of the minor protections pieces, essentially through a head in the sand type approach.
So that's a thing.
But we don't want to encourage age gating either, so we'll just have to think.
Sure, and I don't think that doesn't create like click-ins where people have to affirm, to have to check people's age.
Okay.
It prohibits the controller from deliberately.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to fix that.
Flag. Okay.
Let's jump.
It's a lot of the next changes.
Okay, yeah, a lot of every time you see knows, just think the same thing. So that's bottom of page 34, 35, and 36. So all of those changes are the same kind of change.
Got it.
Okay, we're jumping to page 39. And let me just call out what this is. We're talking about the content of the contract between processor and the controller and what that contract must contain. We previously had language here, a subdivision 9 that prohibited, I believe this is the intermingling data piece.
Right.
And so this is one of the pieces where Vermont was in front of other states, and this deletes that piece. So the previous language said that the contract would specify no intermingling of data the processor has between different entities, and that has been removed.
So just to be clear, when we look at an additional draft, you can't like highlight and strike the language that we deleted.
If it is
It would
so
be helpful to do that, because I thought that the Attorney General said, or somebody said that this didn't affect the inability under one umbrella, under one business umbrella to have different entities, and that somebody said that they could intermingle it with one umbrella, under one umbrella.
So
that was the chap, the hotel owner.
So two different responses. One to this piece, this is specific to processors who just may have contracts with different controllers, so about their intermingling. As to best way to display changes, the reason that it looks this way is that it's a strike all, since it's a massive bill. I can talk to people in my office to see how they approach this, because I agree it makes it entirely
It
dependent on
makes
my
it a lot
memory.
harder for us to say, oh yes, let's keep some of that initial stuff.
And when we start talking to the house, like
Absolutely.
it gets so hard.
Yep.
And hard to negotiate as we go.
Yeah, it's like the way you see it is as if you wanted to vote this out today, removing the highlighting. But it's not. I agree. I'll see if I can figure it out. Yeah. Totally.
It is noon, so could we get to like any other really substantive changes?
Yeah, let me,
that
okay, let's do that. Yes, let's jump to
PRA.
I think that's a good. That's
Yeah,
probably-
let's go for it.
Probably where you're real. Yep. Okay. So page 55, section 2427, we have first You'll see beginning on July 1st, 2026, this is delaying the availability of that private right of action to a year out from the date of effectiveness. You'll see on line 9 that we boosted from the 60-day cure to a 120-day cure period. And then you'll see on lines 10 and 11, trying to limit class actions. I did want to call out a complication with this. Folks in my office had not seen this, and what I have seen at the very least is that other states that have attempted to do this, at the federal level, you will be preempted by federal rules of civil procedure. So effectively, people will go to federal court to enforce class actions. You can't really prohibit them properly.
Okay. If this is protected under the Consumer Protection Act, if you have a right of private action under the Consumer Protection Act anyway, since it's a red flag, why bring it up in this at all? If the right already exists.
I think that's a question. That is a question.
Yeah.
And I don't think the Attorney General gave us anything to make us keep the private right of action in there.
Right, but this
You're
is
keeping it
clear.
independent private right of action.
Yes,
Sure.
yeah.
Yep. The last piece, just that subdivision 3, this is introducing a threshold exclusively for the private right of action. So only available for an action brought against a person that during the preceding calendar year derived more than 50% of the person's gross revenue from the sale of personal data. So it's not about harms to the person, it's about threshold companies. Essentially, it's like the private right of action would only be available against companies that make a large portion of their revenue from selling data.
Yeah, but how does this, to go back to the point of the previous witness, how does this protect, how does this also include big companies that don't necessarily sell data?
It would not be available.
So we could either take the private right of action section out entirely, or we could try to come up with some additional threshold. Those are the questions on the table.
And
do we have
right
a?
now, under consumer protection, a big company that's not selling data is selling grapefruits and they
Right.
sell me a rotten grapefruit. I have consumer protection for private right of action.
Right. Do we, so, I mean, this was my attempt to meet, House Commerce halfway.
Yeah, no,
If I'm hearing maybe 2 people who want the private right of action out, I don't wanna be the tiebreaker yet, and 2 people who want the private right of action in.
I think we don't know enough yet to make that decision at this moment.
Okay, who else would you need to hear from to make that decision?
I still need to understand, I mean, to me, creating a higher threshold for action is an important one.
It
and
could
where we
be.
could start. So for me, I think.
I mean, so what this private right of action has is a cure period and is limiting the private right of action, which might actually now be helpful. I don't know. But we could, I mean, we still should go back and ask the business community who is finding us anyway in the halls, if this is now more helpful to have a very curtailed private right of action than to just leave open Title IX.
Correct.
So that's the question.
I think that's the question,
Right.
I think I'm not prepared to make that
Okay,
decision.
yeah, we all have to go. Is there another big section?
I think
that was the big.
I added this, I would just encourage you guys to take a look at page 58.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what the idea behind this oversight board is. This is very generic.
This is a placeholder and it came up again today with the education group
You don't
because
want-
nobody knows what's.
You don't want the enforcer
To be the
have-
educator.
Yeah.
Although the IRS
I
is-
wouldn't go talk honestly to the attorney general if I didn't know
Yeah.
what the law was. I might be doing something illegal.
When I'm looking for tax information, I go to the IRS. Because I know that it's accurate,
Okay.
so I think there are other ways.
Or you go to an account.
All right, go to the IRS, I just read what they have on their website, and actually, I've been able to call them quicker and get an answer better than TurboTax.
One of the things is you say the answers are always not always consistent for that.
I really have.
Okay, are we all?
So we
fine?
have lots to think about
Okay.
and we're getting more language from more stakeholders. We will see a new draft of this bill next week. I can't guarantee that is the time we vote. I would like to keep this moving. So people need to start getting language. Anyone who came in today, I will look at the language they've given us.
And I would still like to hear about if we have in the private sector another threshold that where we could
Okay.
get companies that comply with some of these safe harbors.
I've asked a group to draft this because higher education faces the same issue. And we're getting so many groups that do have data privacy under other things, so I'm asking them to draft that language for me if they have a federal or interstate data privacy oversight something.
It's gonna be interesting to see the impact on politics.
The politics of us dealing with House Commerce or.
No, the politics of running for election. And data. There's a lot of personal data.
Oh, I see what you're saying, sorry, yes, yeah.
Some of us.
Right, I know. We still, I think that it is an open question still, if why government and political entities, if and why they get a full exemption when others do not.
Yeah. I think we have as much responsibility to people's private data as anybody.
Yes.
I think
I
we
mean,
are
we do need
repositories
money.
of privacy.
Right, but do we disclose fully how to manage that?
Well, we should ask our, maybe Denise, our Secretary of the Agency of Digital Services, maybe we should be asking.
That would be good.
A,
So
yes,
we'll get
and-
digital services and
And maybe government
some other people
accountability.
who are bringing
The person who
suggestions.
runs the Government Accountability Office.
I think each member of the committee should bring in their own personal data management process.
Maybe you
Copy
should
the
hire one for
review.
your campaign.
Well, I mean, there is an issue there, obviously.
Yeah, we could bring the political
Yeah,
parties in.
And there is
Yeah,
basically none,
right,
as you well know.
right. We could, I mean, so would you say that political parties, like the Vermont Republican Party, Vermont Democratic Party, Vermont Progressive Party, are all subject to this law, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay,
Yeah, I don't, there's no, I
There's
looked at
no
the exemptions, I don't think there's an exemption that picks them up.
Okay.
Yeah, and also, by the way, it would be, I think, an interesting exercise for a couple of minutes to just take a look at an abstract review of what's in federal privacy law that's being looked at right now.
Okay.
Because the whole goal of that law is to eliminate state privacy laws because of the hodgepodge of overlaps and confusion.
do you think someone from Welch's office?
Well, there's online, the law as it exists as of 2 days ago, there are a couple of extracts and I could pull that off and just send a copy. You
Okay,
know, it's a high level,
okay.
to all of us.
Why not?
Somebody must
I think that's
have
a
it.
great idea.
Can
The
we get
Welch office.
Senator Welch's
Yeah.
out, and it can be additional to
Yeah.
looking at it,
absolutely.
but to just ask them like, what is the chance of this going through?
But, and there also might be standards that they
Right.
have that we can use.
Right.
And what
is-
level of threshold are you looking at with
You
the
guys-
private right of action?
You guys had requested last week just a really short summary of the bill. Just
Yes,
wanted
we
you guys-
did.
With our changes?
That does reflect the changes.
Tim-
It's
Tim-
very simple,
Great.
but hopefully it is helpful for the implementation. I did also want to call out, if you want to look at the very last pages of the new draft, there is a deep fake piece.
Okay.
Where does this start?
On the other side, who does this apply to?
Oh, right, so we didn't get to look at the deepfake language,
yeah.
but.
And you may want to
You heard
show-
about California, like the.
This is based on model language that I want to say like 15 other states have been using.
Okay, so.
Michelle put this together, and if we want to go deep dive into that, I would encourage.
Okay,
both of you here.
I do wanna say a couple more things on the record before we break. Number one, we're starting at 8:30 the next 2 days as well. We are looking at Friday from 3:30 onward to be with
3:30 to 4:30.
3:30 to 4:30 with Ellen to finish up 687. She's not available Thursday afternoon. So before everyone revolts again, I wanna say that.
Okay, Friday, 3:30 to 4:30.
Yes.
As well
Um,
as 8:30.
I will ask my
Yeah.
afternoon committee.
Right.
You also may be dealing with some pretty big stuff in Senate finance.
So I want Amanda to be here for this, but that's, otherwise we push it further on Reddit, which I have a 1-year-old's birthday party the next day, so, I don't wanna do that either, but that's the window that we have right now, and I can't change that. The last thing I wanna say is I do wanna be transparent that I am having budgetary conversations, especially right now around housing, since not everything's settled on economic development, but particularly around housing with the chair of Senate Appropriations. I am doing work with JFO over the next 2 lunches to understand, basically, the biggest problem we face is not where to put the money. It's where did the House put the money? Where did we put the money?
And where is the money? For
Where is it
example,
one time? Where is it ongoing?
the workforce development bill has money in it because we're creating a new.
So I'm
fund.
leaving, I'm not trying to deal with that today.
No, I appreciate, so
or
where
tomorrow.
is that money accounted for? Is it in the budget or is it somewhere else? And they're coming for lunch. So
Okay,
they're here at 12:15.
if you want to take the lead
I
on
will find out.
where economic development money lives, that's fine. There's a lot of questions around, because we have a housing bill that has $130 million in it, then that is a problem for how we do our budgeting. So that's my transparent announcement to people, that that's a conversation between me and Senator Kitchell that I will bring back to this committee.
Right.
And I'm mostly aligning with our priorities in S 311.
Right.
And I want people to remember that none of the big dollars in the House bill come to fruition until 2026. So that's a very theoretical conversation that is off the table for me, because we can't decide the intent of a future legislature.
Right.
But some of the policy stuff like the refugee housing is still being.
Yeah, and that's for this
Some
year's
stuff is
budget.
a
Yeah.
green light now, but we often put into dates in the future.
I don't care. That's not a conversation I'm willing to entertain about $2026 that, or probably not
yeah,
happening
sure.
in Senate Finance.
But we often don't have things start, but we often delay dates. Dates are not the issue. You're talking about just the money.
I'm talking about the general fund being spoken for in 2026 is not a
Right.
concern we have
Cannot-
to deal with this year.
We cannot tie.
Okay.
Totally theoretical.
Yes, thanks so much.